a new path towards inclusion of persons with disability, an initiative of the European project Bridging the Gap, organized in collaboration with UNPRPD, ILO, Unicef, the International Disability Alliance, and the African Disability Forum. Just before, a few words of introduction, which for the sake of the interpreters, I will be delivering in French, just a little bit of housekeeping from my side. This session is being recorded. You have probably noticed I've repeated it a few times before beginning this introduction. Interpretation is available in English, French, Arabic, Portuguese, International Sign Language, and American Sign Language. Captioning is also available in English and French. Kindly keep your cameras and microphones off all the time, so that on screen we can have only the sign language interpreters and everybody can have access to them. Use the chat in case of problems, doubts, questions you may have, and we try to sort them out as much as possible. To the speakers and the interpreters and the moderators, I'm sorry, please be ready on time for your panels and kindly stick to the allotted time as much as possible. We're already a little bit late and we have a very dense and tight agenda. So let's try to stick to it as much as possible for the sake of a good flowing of this webinar and also for respect of the work of the interpreters. So as I said, I'm going to switch to French just for a very, very brief introduction. Donc voilà, je vous remercie encore une fois. Merci à toutes et à tous pour nous joindre. Nous avons eu une réponse extraordinaire à cette session que nous avons organisée en collaboration avec nos collègues de ILO, du Forum international des personnes vivant avec un handicap, Unicef, et du Forum africain des personnes vivant avec un handicap. Je veux seulement remercier toutes et tous les membres des équipes impliqués dans l'organisation de cette session, de cet atelier. Vous savez, c'est une conférence sur 2 journées. Aujourd'hui, un séminaire technique. Demain, une conférence dialogue politique sur la même thématique. L'inclusion dans la protection sociale est un thème de grande actualité aujourd'hui, dont les enjeux sont d'actualité, notamment accentués pour la crise du Covid. Les expériences et pratiques, j'écoute, excusez-moi un peu de background noise. Ok, c'est bien. Les expériences et pratiques qui seront présentées aujourd'hui représentent un point de départ pour bâtir ensemble des politiques publiques de protection sociale qui soient réellement à mesure de ne laisser personne de côté. Dans ce contexte, la capacité des acteurs de la coopération internationale de capitaliser sur ces expériences pour appuyer un agenda international en droite ligne avec la Convention des droits des personnes handicapées et les ODD, les objectifs de développement durable, est condition nécessaire et indispensable pour la réussite de ces initiatives. Donc voilà, j'avais encore quelques mots, mais c'est mieux que je m'arrête ici. Je vous souhaite une excellente continuation et de bien profiter des débats qui suivront. Et j'ai l'honneur et le plaisir de laisser la parole à M. Idriss Maïga, président du Forum africain des personnes vivant avec un handicap. Je ne suis pas sûr qu'il soit en ligne déjà. Est-ce que vous pouvez me confirmer que M. Maïga il est là et peut nous adresser quelques mots, M. Maïga?
Bonjour, Federico. Chari speaking here from IDA. Shweib, the director of African Disability Forum, will be making the opening remarks.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Choria. Shweib, monsieur, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. My apologies that the chair could not make it for this session, but let me introduce who ADF is, first of all. The African Disability Forum, for those who don't know us, is the regional African assembly of people with disabilities in Africa. We are active and we have membership in 42 countries in Africa, and we have our head office in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And we have regional offices in Niamey, Niger, and an office in Cape Town, South Africa. Our main focus as African Disability Forum is to provide a voice, first of all, for Africans with disabilities. And when we found the organization, the African Disability Forum, we had an extensive consultative process to design a strategic plan that would set out the vision and the strategy for African Disability Forum over the next 5 years. And the two things that came out of that strategic plan was a focus on poverty and social protection and the conditions of women with disabilities in Africa. So these were the main focus. And for us, social protection remains our main strategic priority in Africa. So with that in mind, this workshop and the initiatives that we undertake with the International Disability Alliance and all our other partners focuses on social protection measures. And we have a belief and a firm commitment to lobby and advocate for social protection measures. But we also believe that there is not a single country in Africa that cannot implement some kind of social protection measures. We do not accept excuses about lack of resources or capacity. We believe it can be done, and it has been done in countries like Eritrea or Ethiopia or any other countries that is resource scarce, or some of the least developed countries as they are called. One of the key challenges for us is that we face a lack of data. Our advocacy initiatives is data scarce. Let me give you an example. If we want to take, and I'm giving just an example, I'm naming, let's say Niamey in Niger, and we have no inclusive education facilities anywhere in Niger. For us to lobby the government, who, by the way, have a policy on inclusive education, for us to lobby the government, we need to sharpen our advocacy strategy. And that means we need to have some data to present to the government so that we can say to them, you have to implement social protection measures, and inclusive education is one of those things that we'd like you to focus on. And this is what we think you should do. For example, we should be able to say to the government, you have 300 schools in Niamey, and not a single one is accessible. This is what it would cost to make one school fully inclusive. And this is the number of learners that would benefit from it. I'm giving this as an example, but we lack even the basic data. So we have quite a long way to go. And therefore, these kinds of exchanges that we have now today will assist us as well and support us as we continue to lobby and advocate and fight these challenges that we are facing related to poverty and the lack of social protection in Africa. So I'm going to be moderating a panel a bit later on disability assessment and policy planning. But for now, given that we have some time constraints, I'd like to stop there and hand back to Federico.
Thank you very much, Jacques and Schwab. A pleasure to hear from you. With no further ado, I leave the floor to Veronica Vojdak, also for her welcome address. Veronica, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thanks a lot for joining us. I'm really excited to see so many of you interested in the workshop that we've jointly organized. This workshop is part of an activity that we as the ILO support in the context of the global project implemented jointly by UNICEF, IDA, and funded from UNPRPD. Focusing on making social protection systems more inclusive and supportive of participation of persons with disabilities. the project was designed on the basis of the joint statement launched in 2018 towards inclusive social protection systems, supporting full and effective participation and inclusion of persons with disabilities, that was facilitated by ILO and IDA, and many of you may know. So the main starting point for this project was the realization that very often we don't really have a common understanding and a common vision between different entities at the government level, but also between governments, organizations of persons with disabilities, and development agencies. And also there's like, on the one hand, the disability community, and on the other hand, the social protection community. And what we really need is more of a joint understanding and vision of how to move social protection systems to become more inclusive. So the project has worked across regions in the last 2 years. On the one hand, by developing background materials and evidence base. I mean, we just heard that this is still a bit of a challenge when it comes to really meaningful data and information, but we're trying to address this. So on the one hand, there's the evidence base. On the other hand, we've also engaged in capacity strengthening through training programs, amongst others in collaboration with the Bonn-Rhein-Sieg University, that is now offering twice a year a course. And also there's an ongoing training of trainers together with IDA. So I mean, these were the project activities as they were originally planned. And then we had, of course, the onset of COVID. And with that crisis, we've also engaged in multiple outreach activities to support UN country teams and also organizations of persons with disability to engage with governments to ensure that the COVID response would be more inclusive of persons with disability. And in Africa, arguably there's still emerging support for persons with disability, but there really has been a surge of interest recently over the past few years, and an increasing engagement on social protection and disability. And I mean, this is related to existing gaps still in current systems, but also maybe to a change in mentality and mindsets. And in this context, we're really excited to today and tomorrow exchange and hearing your diverse presentations during the conference, and hearing from you also about critical issues regarding a full range of really important and difficult issues to address when working towards more inclusive social protection systems, such as disability assessments, the development of cash transfer programs and services, and also service offers to provide income security and access to services for persons with disability. I mean, what can we say about accessible design of schemes and programs? Questions like extra cost of disability, how to assess them, how to cover them, access to healthcare, access to education, employment, etc. So we're really looking forward to this exchange. Thank you very much. And I guess I'm handing back to Federico.
That's correct. That's right. Yes, Veronica, thank you very much. Thank you, and Director Schalken, for your introduction, and thank you. Actually, I'm delighted you could take a little bit more time than myself to present your work and the importance of this conference for discussing inclusive social protection. So now we can actually step into the actual program of our workshop, and I am honored and pleased to leave the floor to Alexandre Cote and Taylor Spadafora for the keynote address towards inclusive social protection systems for participation of persons with disabilities that will help us, let's say, dwelling a little bit more into the topic and prepare for the discussions that will follow. In the meantime, I already asked the speakers and moderators of the first panel to get their engine started and be prepared for the session that'll follow. Alex and Taylor, over to you, and to everybody, enjoy the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Federico, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. So we'll start with a brief introduction on what are the key elements we would like to consider when we think about social protection systems for inclusion of persons with disabilities. So very briefly, just to make sure that we all start from the same point, we consider basically the role of social protection systems in addressing life cycle vulnerability and poverty in childhood, working age, and old age. And this can take many forms. Social protection can provide child benefit, unemployment benefit, old age pension, disability benefit, financial access to healthcare, maternity benefit. There are also social safety nets, which often would be considered, for instance, poverty assistance scheme, and access, facilitating access to education in terms of cost coverage, but also provision of social welfare services, which are very important for a person with disabilities. And all those programs can be financed either through contribution in social insurance or through tax finance schemes directly from the budget. So why social protection is important for persons with disabilities? I don't think it's a surprise for anybody. Persons with disability are more likely to live in a poor household, are more vulnerable to shock, are facing disability-related costs, might have need for support at different stages of life, and face significant discrimination and barriers in terms of education and work opportunities. They also have, in average, higher needs for healthcare, combining regular healthcare needs with disability-specific healthcare needs. I just wanted to pay a little bit more attention to this notion of disability extra cost, which is extremely important. As persons with disability and their families at equal income than those without disability who actually have lower standard of living because part of their income has to be dedicated to disability-related costs, which would be, for instance, assistive device, sign language interpretation, home adaptation, but it can be also using taxi because public transport are not accessible. All those costs actually push persons with disabilities and their families in poverty and prevent or undermine their socioeconomic participation. So what can be expected from inclusive social protection system across the life cycle? Providing basic income security and adequate standard of living, coverage of healthcare costs, including rehabilitation and assistive device, coverage of other disability-related costs, including access to support services, and facilitating access to early childhood development, education, and economic empowerment program. And to do that, we need a diversity of schemes that can be either in cash or in kind, with a set of cash transfer, but also, for instance, concession with regards to discount or subsidies for transport or housing or utilities, but also direct provision of support services such as sign language interpreters or personal assistance. One of the big issues we have in sub-Saharan Africa is that this is one of the regions of the world with the lowest coverage in terms of disability benefit. Less than 7% of people with significant disability get a disability benefit, compared to 1 in 5, 18.5% in low and middle income countries globally. So there is a need to expand social protection in general and in particular for persons with disabilities. But doing more is not always doing better. And it's very important to keep in mind some key elements related to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability when it comes to social protection. We need to ensure support across the life cycle, from childhood to old age. We need to have a support that is focused on participation and support to participation rather than incapacity to work. Many schemes for persons with disabilities are conditioned by the incapacity to work or the people not working. And if people take work, then they lose the support, which actually undermine inclusion. One size does not fit all. Not all people with disabilities have the same need and the same support requirement. And very often there is one package with one amount, which may be enough for some people, will definitely not be enough for others. So this is why we need a combination of schemes that will be tailored to a different situation. The support that is provided should always aim at community inclusion. There is the temptation sometimes to create, for instance, residential institutions for persons with disabilities rather than investing in community support services. The CRPD is very clear that the latter is actually the way to go. In the way the support is provided should always foster autonomy, choice, and control. Often, the benefits for disability are given to household, which means that person with disability within the household, if they are not the head of the household, will have very little control of the support provided. So again, it's a support, but it might not foster empowerment of person with disabilities. To provide disability support, government need to do disability assessment and determination. They need to decide who are officially persons with disabilities and what are their needs. Very often, this assessment is done via medical certificates, which are difficult to get and don't provide all the necessary information in terms of support requirement. Many countries are trying to change that, and we will hear about that in a few minutes. It is also important to adopt a twin-track approach, which means to make mainstream schemes of social protection as inclusive as possible for persons with disabilities, and developing disability-specific schemes to address, for instance, disability-related costs that are sometimes more specific. And in doing all that, of course, government and development agencies need to work with organizations of persons with disabilities to set priorities. We know that the resources are scarce and tight, and we will have to prioritize in progressively achieving universal social protection. In making those prioritization, it's very important to consult and engage with organizations of persons with disabilities. I just wanted to quickly mention a very important point we saw during COVID, and again, we will hear about that in a few minutes, the importance of social protection information system and disability registry. When government do disability assessment and determination, and for instance, provide a disability card or equal opportunity card, it's very important that this contribute to build a disability registry that is national, that has a good coverage, so that it helps both case management, referral, but also policy planning and costing. If government, as Schweb said earlier, if government do not have data about who are persons with disability, how many are they, and what do they need, it will be very difficult to develop inclusive social protection systems. And finally, if we need to have in mind the diversity of those mechanisms and to think about how progressively we will provide support to the diversity of persons with disabilities. What will be given to people with disability that are registered, all of them. For instance, universal health coverage should be a priority, including coverage of assistive device. For people with disability that have significant support needs and disability cost, there should be a disability allowance, because otherwise they will have a lot of difficulty to actually engage in education, in employment and community. But we need also development of support services from the younger age to old age. And finally, for people with disabilities who do not have income, because there are too many barriers to be able to reach employment, it is important also to ensure basic income security, and it can take different form in different countries. So I would like now to give the floor to my colleague Taylor, who is the Social Protection Advisor for the Eastern and Southern Africa Regional Office of UNICEF, to give us a little bit of perspective about what's going on in the region. Taylor?
Great. Thank you so much, Alex. And good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us to share some lessons. So as Alex said, I am the social protection specialist in the UNICEF regional office that covers Eastern and Southern Africa. So most of my focus is going to be on that region, as I know well. Next slide, please. So just to highlight and reiterate a couple examples from what people have said already, we do have some really good news in terms of improving inclusion of persons with disabilities in social protection systems in the region. So most countries are actually already working towards robust social protection systems, and through that developing policies, testing systems, and designing programs, mostly social assistance at this stage. And from the get-go, from the design, persons with disabilities are already included as intended beneficiaries. So there's a really strong political economy to make the case for inclusion. There are a few countries that have started making this shift towards universal support and universal coverage. And that's really helping to make the case and to really build in a lot more of inclusive systems as we go forward. And there's also some kind of piecemeal and bits and pieces of progress towards making social protection more inclusive. And this is really building off of a couple different facets or implementation experiences. So for example, there's a few countries in the region that have offered top-ups in the COVID social protection response to persons with disabilities. There's also a big push from several countries to improve the disability assessment and determination mechanisms and move towards a more social model, as opposed to sticking with that medical model that Alex had talked about. And we're going to hear some of these examples, not only from my region, but also from the whole Sub-Saharan Africa region in some of the presentations today. We also are looking towards improving implementation to ensure accessibility. So it's not only about doing appropriate identification and inclusion, but also making sure that people are actually able to access their benefits well and are not limited by the design of the program. And then, of course, a very big and important element is to look at doing better linkages with services. And so from the UNICEF perspective, we talk about this in the terminology of cash plus, meaning we look at social assistance beneficiaries and actually opening up their access to more information and other services. And we definitely are working towards a better focus on disability services as well on this. Next slide, please. Now, there is a little bit of less good news, or I guess I should say more limitations in some of this progress that we're working towards. First and foremost, while persons with disabilities are already included as part of the eligible population for a lot of social assistance programs, a lot of these programs are targeting households and not individuals. And so as Alex had alluded to, this means that the benefit is usually universal for all beneficiaries, and it doesn't actually take into account disability related costs or add any additional benefits from that perspective. Also, in terms of doing identification, the determination of disability usually relies heavily on the medical model or on personal bias in terms of visible disabilities that can be seen. I think I had already seen in the chat box something around looking at mental health and mental disabilities, and that is something that we're still working towards trying to shift. Again, when we're talking about cash plus and really trying to make cash work best for these families, you have to have the service on the other end to be able to really make that link between the two. And there are, of course, a lot of limitations around disability support services. And that's where we're trying to build out this community level approach. And I think we're going to hear some good examples from some countries later on today about this. Of course, the broad-based limitation for social protection is that fiscal space is limited in these government budgets. And so while there may be a lot of good intention and objectives set out, having the actual financial resources to achieve those is a bit of a slower, more phased approach. And as several of the colleagues have already said today, data is still very scarce. So we're really working to build that out so we understand if we're doing appropriate coverage and who we're missing. So just a couple examples from my region. When we're looking at these social protection systems that are slowly building out and scaling up, we're really using that expansion as momentum to build in better inclusive parameters into the programs. And there's a couple examples here in the region. Of course, I'm not going to read them all through to you because you can see them. However, we really want to look towards more inclusive approaches, and also that includes in terms of participation. So really hearing the experiences and the needs directly from persons with disabilities and trying to adapt the programs to meet those needs accordingly. There's a lot of good examples. Zambia is a key example of that right now. Of course, making the implementation of social assistance programs more accessible. And this is something that's really taking a forefront in Mozambique's programming right now to ensure that people can access the resources and the benefits that they actually are being offered by government, so that it's not just a promise, but they're actually delivering on that. Now, in an interesting case in Kenya is they're piloting a universal child grant, so really trying to make sort of this universal approach. And from the design of that and from the beginning of it, trying to identify how to make it more inclusive for children with disabilities and for their caretakers, so that you're really building that in from the beginning and from the design stage, as opposed to waiting till the end and trying to make adjustments later on. And then Madagascar and Zimbabwe are both doing really good work around looking at better registration, better determination, and also setting up some referral mechanisms that really incorporate organizations of persons with disabilities, so that, again, we make sure the service is available on the other end that we're referring people into. So that is all from just a very brief snapshot from the Eastern and Southern Africa region. Really looking forward to seeing how the discussion and the examples play out later on today, and moving forward this really important agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Taylor, for your presentation and for setting the ground for the discussion that will follow. It was very important, of course, as Alex said at the very beginning, to be pretty much everybody on the same page and on the same level of knowledge when it comes to inclusive social protection. So now that we have set the ground, set the basis, we can actually move into the panel debates. We can start with the first panel now, after which we will take a short break. We're a little bit delayed, as you know. We started a little late, but nevertheless, we may recover, I think, a little bit of time this panel, where we have only 2 speakers instead of 3 as initially planned. So I will no further ado leave the floor to the moderator and rapporteur of panel discussion 1, Shuaib Shalken, Executive Director of the Africa Disability Forum. We had the pleasure to have him just a moment ago for the welcome address, to introduce the panel discussion 1, from disability assessment to policy planning and case management. Director, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Federico. Yeah, as Federico said, that we're not doing the introduction, we're going to move to the speakers, but
no, sorry, no, I didn't say we're not going to do the introduction. There is an introduction, I think, to the panel by ADF as well, by the African Disability Forum. I don't know if you got me wrong on this. I'm sorry.
Let me quickly clarify. I'm sorry. The introduction is supposed to be done by Ayasu, and Ayasu is not online. He's having technical difficulties, and so that's what I meant. We're going to move to the speakers, if that's okay.
Oh, je suis connecté.
Ayasu, are you there?
Ayasu est connecté.
Oui, okay, Ayasu, please let me introduce. Ayasu is going to do the introduction. I'll hand over straight to Ayasu. Ayasu, please proceed.
Ok, merci beaucoup pour cette panel et l'opportunité qui m'est donnée de présenter un mot introductif. La réduction des inégalités, de la pauvreté entre les couches aisées et les populations à revenus modestes constitue une priorité des États africains, souvent évoquée dans les discours officiels et matérialisée dans les politiques publiques sous l'angle du socle de protection sociale contributive, réaliste et adapté aux conditions économiques de chaque pays. Ainsi, les premières mesures prises sont souvent tournés vers la protection sociale contributive avec la mise en place des caisses nationales de retraite et de sécurité sociale et des systèmes d'assurance maladie. Les populations vulnérables, y compris les personnes handicapées, sont souvent considérées comme des cas sociaux et versées dans des programmes d'appui des ministères en charge des affaires sociales et les ressources allouées à ces ministères ne permettent pas de couvrir les besoins réels, d'où des appuis de saupoudrage. Or, l'élément important qui devait être pris en compte en ce qui concerne les personnes handicapées devait être axé sur la protection sociale non contributive. Depuis l'adoption de la Convention relative aux droits des personnes handicapées et des objectifs de développement durable à l'horizon 2030, qui vise que personne ne soit laissé de côté, le handicap est reconnu comme faisant partie de la diversité humaine et de l'humanité. Différentes initiatives ont été prises ça et là pour garantir aux personnes handicapées la jouissance du droit à la protection sociale. C'est le cas, par exemple, des avantages liés à la détention de la carte d'égalité de chance au Sénégal, des allocations de handicap en Afrique du Sud, en Namibie et en île Maurice, et du développement de systèmes d'information sur le handicap au Rwanda. Toutefois, si ces initiatives sont encourageantes par leur impact sur la vie des personnes handicapées, elles suscitent des interrogations et des défis à relever par la prise en compte des points suivants. L'évaluation du handicap, le premier point, l'évaluation du handicap pour obtenir le statut d'invalidité ne doit pas être basée sur une approche médicale, mais sur la difficulté fonctionnelle et le soutien nécessaire. Le deuxième point, les données recueillies à partir de l'évaluation du handicap devaient être utilisées pour les critères d'éligibilité ainsi que pour la planification des politiques, la planification budgétaire et la gestion des cas. Le troisième point, ces données recueillies seront également extrêmement utilisées quand les crises humanitaires telles que la crise de COVID-19, quand il sera facile d'utiliser ces données pour identifier les personnes handicapées et le soutien dont elles ont besoin. Et le troisième point, pour atteindre les objectifs mentionnés ci-dessus, nous avons besoin d'un système d'infrastructure approprié qui est un système de base de données numérisé et intégré dans le système de registre. Nous sommes conscients que la prise en compte de ces éléments permettrait d'être encore mieux dans les États en ce qui concerne la prise en compte de la protection sociale non contributive. La communication des panélistes qui vont se suivre tout à l'heure nous permettront d'être édifiés sur certaines expériences en dégageant leurs forces et faiblesses et faire des recommandations pour plus d'efficacité et d'efficience dans les actions de protection sociale de nos États. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Yasu. Thank you for your introduction, and my apologies because I did not see you initially on the participant list, and I know we all had this problem initially to access the link.
C'est vrai, j'étais déjà... Non, c'était bon, c'est que je n'étais pas rentré très tôt, je n'ai pas bien suivi l'heure.
Ah, okay. Nevertheless, thank you for your contribution. But let us move on. We have two speakers now, and the first speaker is Mamadou Lamine Fatih, Director, Ministry of Social Action and Health in Senegal.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, je suis là, connecté. Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Yes, we can hear you.
Voilà, merci. Est-ce que je peux avoir le support de ma communication en écran partagé? J'avais envoyé, voilà. Merci beaucoup. Voilà, donc permettez-moi tout d'abord de remercier Monsieur le directeur Frédéric Martyr pour avoir invité le Sénégal à cet important webinaire. Alors, je vais dans ma communication présenter donc très rapidement le système d'évaluation du handicap au Sénégal appliqué à la production de la carte d'égalité des chances. Diapositive. Vous pouvez dérouler le prochain diapo, s'il vous plaît. Suivant. Voilà, donc dans ma communication, je vais présenter brièvement les résultats.
Monsieur...
Oui. Oui.
The sound seems to be very low, the volume. Could you increase the volume?
Le volume.
Yeah.
Sur ma machine, le volume est au maximum. Hein?
Okay, very good. Much better.
C'est bon? Est-ce que vous m'entendez bien?
Oui, on vous entend bien, Monsieur Lamine Fatih. Vous pouvez suivre, s'il vous plaît.
Yes.
Voilà, merci beaucoup. Donc, au point 3, nous allons présenter sommairement les résultats du programme de la carte d'égalité des chances sur la période 2012-2021, évoquer les défis et enfin terminer par les perspectives. Suivant. Dérouler les diapos, s'il vous plaît. Suivant. Voilà. Alors, pour ce qui est de la définition du handicap, par personne handicapée, on entend toutes les personnes donc, qui présentent des incapacités physiques, mentales, intellectuelles ou sensorielles, dont l'interaction avec diverses barrières peut porter atteinte à leur pleine et effective participation à la société sur la base de l'égalité. Donc, cette définition-là est extraite de la loi d'orientation sociale du Sénégal. Diapositive. Suivant. Suivant. Voilà, donc au Sénégal, la population des personnes handicapées s'élève environ à 800 000 personnes, soit en valeur relative 5,9% de la population, donc selon le recensement de l'agence statistique de 2013. Et donc, comme autre élément de contexte, il faut noter que au Sénégal, il y a une loi d'orientation sociale relative au handicap. Et aujourd'hui, la directive, c'est de mettre en œuvre les mécanismes de cette loi. Diapositive. Suivant. Vous pouvez dérouler, s'il vous plaît. Diapositive. Voilà. Donc, sur cette diapositive, au point 2, nous avons le système d'évaluation du handicap au Sénégal, qui est basé sur un instrument national de mesure du handicap, qui est adossé à 2 normes internationales et complété par un système de scoring. Donc, du point de vue de l'évaluation, donc de la recherche évaluative, l'instrument du Sénégal est une échelle de rapport qui permet donc d'évaluer le handicap et permet de déterminer le degré et la nature du handicap. Donc, l'instrument du Sénégal fait la synthèse de 2 normes. D'abord, pour ce qui est de l'analyse de la dimension sanitaire de la personne, l'instrument du Sénégal est basé sur la CIF, la classification internationale du fonctionnement. Donc, prend en compte les 8 fonctions de la CIF. Et pour ce qui est donc de l'analyse de la dimension socio-économique de la personne handicapée, nous avons utilisé le MAVI. Donc, MAVI qui signifie mesure des habitudes de vie, qui est un instrument québécois. Ensuite, comme je l'ai dit, l'instrument est complété par un système de scoring. Donc, au total, lorsqu'on administre l'instrument, on a un total de 46 points. Et donc, lorsqu'on interprète les résultats, nous avons 4 niveaux de gravité sur l'échelle, donc qui peut déterminer sur des valeurs allant de 0 à 100%. Diapositive. Suivant, s'il vous plaît. OK, ici, vous avez un peu l'instrument, donc le système d'interprétation avec les valeurs, handicap léger, modéré, sévère, profond, avec les différents niveaux de gravité. Et vous avez l'interprétation du handicap avec pratiquement 6 catégories de handicap qui sont déterminées, mais tout en tenant compte également des différents niveaux de déficience qui ont été analysés grâce à la CIF. Donc, cet instrument-là a été validé techniquement en 2016. Diapositive. Diapositive, s'il vous plaît. Slide. Voilà, c'est toujours l'instrument que vous avez. C'est une image. Donc, c'est un document qui est disponible, que nous pouvons partager donc, avec les organisateurs. Diapositive. C'est juste une image pour illustrer. Diapositive. Voilà, donc au plan juridique, il faut savoir que la carte d'égalité des chances, qui est un système de protection sociale des personnes handicapées a été instituée par la loi sur le handicap de 2010 au Sénégal, donc mentionnée dans son article 3. Cette carte est réglementée par un décret, en l'occurrence le décret 2012-1038, et le spécimen de la carte d'égalité des chances est fixé par un arrêté du ministre de la Santé et de l'Action sociale, c'est l'arrêté 4867 du 30 mars 2015. Donc, tous ces documents également peuvent être partagés dans le cadre donc, de cette collaboration. Diapositive. Suivant, s'il vous plaît. Voilà, ici, vous avez le lancement du programme de la carte d'égalité des chances au Sénégal par le chef de l'État que vous voyez ici en bleu, entouré des personnes handicapées bénéficiaires de la carte lors du lancement en 2015. Et il faut dire que la carte d'égalité des chances traduit l'engagement politique du chef de l'État, son Excellence Macky Sall, qui a tenu lui-même à lancer le programme et à formuler des directives pour que cette carte soit fonctionnelle et qu'elle soit articulée à des programmes de filets sociaux. Diapositive. Alors, sur cette diapositive, vous avez le spécimen de la carte d'égalité des chances. Donc, au recto, vous avez les éléments d'état civil, la photo de la personne handicapée, les éléments d'état civil, le numéro de sa carte nationale d'identité. En bas, en noir, dans l'encadré, vous avez l'évaluation du handicap avec la nature du handicap, ME, signifiant handicap mental. Le chiffre 1 en dessus de ME, c'est le numéro d'ordre dans la base de données. Et Dakar, c'est la région de provenance de la personne bénéficiaire. Et c'est la Direction générale de l'action sociale qui certifie le handicap conformément à la loi. Et donc, au verso, vous avez donc les avantages de la carte d'égalité des chances matérialisés par des hologrammes. Vous voyez, donc, il y a des hologrammes circulaires qui traduisent les avantages de la carte d'égalité des chances. Ici, vous avez l'avantage transport, l'avantage santé, et il y a autant d'avantages que de hologrammes qui vont être apposés au recto de la carte d'égalité des chances. Diapositive. Suivant, s'il vous plaît. Voilà, donc il faut savoir que cette carte d'égalité des chances est adossée à un système d'information et de gestion, donc connecté à interface web. Hein. Donc, tout le processus de production de la carte d'égalité des chances est informatisé. Et il y a donc un ingénieur en informatique qui nous accompagne dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre du programme. Et diapositive. Suivant, s'il vous plaît. Voilà, ici, vous avez les étapes de la production de la carte d'égalité des chances. Donc, l'étape numéro 1, les personnes handicapées s'inscrivent au programme, ils fournissent un dossier complet. Ensuite, il y a un processus de validation des dossiers, des demandes individuelles par des commissions techniques qui sont créées par décret. Donc, c'est le décret de 2012 que j'ai évoqué tantôt. Et une fois que les demandes sont instruites, donc tous les dossiers qui sont valides donc font l'objet d'un procès verbal et il y a transmission du procès verbal au niveau central. Et ensuite, il y a au point 3 un système d'enregistrement des dossiers et qui permet donc, une fois enregistré, d'imprimer la carte d'égalité des chances. Et une fois que la carte est imprimée, il y a un processus de distribution des cartes dans les 14 régions. Et comme je l'ai dit, ces cartes d'égalité des chances sont adossées à des services, notamment 7 services que nous allons voir tout à l'heure dans les images. Diapositive. Suivant. Voilà. Donc, la carte d'égalité des chances est adossée à des services, hein, notamment l'éducation, la formation, le transport, l'emploi et les services financiers. Et également, grâce aux directives présidentielles de 2015, aujourd'hui au Sénégal, la carte d'égalité des chances est adossée donne droit à des bourses de sécurité familiale qui sont annuelles d'une valeur de 100 000 francs CFA. Donc également, elle donne droit à des soins de santé parce que la base de données et de la carte d'égalité des chances est versée dans le registre national des groupes vulnérables et elle permet donc d'inscrire les personnes handicapées dans des mutuelles de santé. Et également, la carte d'égalité des chances donne droit à des services de réadaptation gratuitement. Alors, il faut noter que tous les services, l'accès à ces services-là n'est pas universel pour le moment. C'est un système en construction. Et aujourd'hui, sur les 7 avantages conférés par la loi, seuls 3 sont effectivement en vigueur pratiquement à l'échelle par rapport au nombre de cartes produites. Et il y a un plan que nous développons pour l'accès universel des personnes handicapées à tous les services, mais également pour l'accès, donc pour la fonctionnalité de tous les avantages auxquels donne droit la carte d'égalité des chances. Diapositive. Suivant, s'il vous plaît. Voilà, ici, sur ce graphique, vous avez, il faut savoir que le programme de la carte d'égalité des chances est adossé à un programme national de réadaptation à base communautaire qui, depuis 2012, a permis d'accompagner près de 262 000 personnes handicapées à travers des projets individuels et collectifs. Ce score prend en compte toutes les cartes qui ont été produites parce que c'est le programme national, justement, qui met en œuvre le ciblage pour identifier les personnes handicapées dans les régions. À ce jour, au Sénégal, nous avons produit 64 728 cartes d'égalité des chances. Il y a 24 827 personnes handicapées détentrices de la carte qui sont inscrites dans des mutuelles de santé, donc pour leur permettre d'accéder à des soins de santé. Il y a 25 614 personnes handicapées qui ont obtenu des bourses de sécurité familiale qui sont d'ailleurs octroyées par un autre ministère qui est différent du ministère de la Santé et de l'Action sociale. Il y a également 633 personnes handicapées qui ont accès gratuitement au système de transport public. Et au Sénégal, dans le cadre du programme de réadaptation à base communautaire, il y a, depuis 2012, il y a 7 785 personnes handicapées qui ont accès gratuitement à l'appareillage. Et nous avons formulé des directives pour que l'appareillage soit articulé à la carte d'égalité des chances de manière systématique. Diapositive. Voilà, donc, comme je l'ai dit tantôt, le système d'information et de gestion de la carte d'égalité des chances donc, est un outil statistique très puissant qui favorise et facilite la production de données statistiques relatives au handicap désagrégées et ventilées. Ici, vous avez la répartition des cartes d'égalité des chances par région. Au Sénégal, vous avez 14 régions avec un score de carte d'égalité des chances qui nous permet donc de suivre l'état de mise en œuvre de la carte de la production dans chaque région et de développer autour de la carte d'égalité des chances des plans d'action individualisés. Diapositive. Diapositive. Voilà, donc à la lumière donc, de ma présentation, au Sénégal, nous sommes confrontés à 5 principaux défis. Le premier défi, c'est la mise en œuvre des mécanismes de la loi d'orientation sociale. Nous avons dénombré environ 15 mécanismes phares, dont la carte d'égalité des chances, qui est l'un des mécanismes les plus importants. Nous avons également le second défi. Nous avons le second défi relatif à la maîtrise des données statistiques relatives au handicap, donc qui va être facilité par la carte d'égalité des chances en corrélation avec les éléments du recensement national des personnes handicapées que j'ai évoqué. Le troisième défi donc est relatif au renforcement des capacités des acteurs qui doivent être formés sur le handicap, capacité, mais également qui doivent s'approprier du système d'évaluation du handicap que j'ai tantôt évoqué. Donc, on doit former tous les membres des commissions départementales chargées de l'évaluation du handicap. Là, c'est un grand défi avec la mobilité du personnel. Quatrième défi, c'est la mobilisation des ressources techniques et financières. Et cinquième défi, c'est le défi du partenariat et de la coopération que le Sénégal vraiment sollicite et souhaite pour justement optimiser la gestion du handicap. Diapositive. Suivant. Diapo, s'il vous plaît. Voilà, donc pour ce qui est des perspectives, c'est pratiquement à la fin de la communication. Nous voulons mettre en œuvre un projet d'extension du programme de la carte d'égalité des chances pour la période 2021-2023 axé sur un recensement spécial de la population handicapée et corrélé à l'instrument national de mesure de handicap pour un accès universel des personnes handicapées à la carte d'égalité des chances à l'horizon 2023 sous la supervision de l'Agence nationale statistique. Et également, nous voulons donc développer un système de renforcement des capacités des membres des 45 commissions techniques départementales chargées d'instruire les demandes de carte d'égalité des chances en vue d'une appropriation du système d'évaluation du handicap par les acteurs. Troisièmement, nous voulons également développer la coopération technique et financière entre le Sénégal et les autres organismes internationaux et les partenaires dans le domaine du handicap pour justement la mise en œuvre du projet d'extension que je viens d'évoquer. Parce que nous pensons que c'est le point central, c'est le point focal. Si nous parvenons à opérer l'extension du programme de la carte, ça nous permet de maîtriser à terme, in fine, la population des personnes handicapées et donc de produire des données statistiques désagrégées et ventilées par domaine. Et ça va faciliter donc la formulation de politiques publiques spécifiques en direction des personnes handicapées. Nous saluons justement un partenariat naissant avec le BIT, qui justement est un partenaire qui nous a invités à des webinaires internationaux comme celui-ci, par exemple, sur le programme de la carte d'égalité des chances. Et actuellement, au Sénégal, le BIT nous accompagne pour évaluer le programme de la carte d'égalité des chances pour nous permettre à terme de reformuler donc ce programme-là dans le cadre d'un projet d'extension et nous accompagner également pour la recherche de moyens. C'est le lieu donc de remercier le BIT pour cet accompagnement, mais également de remercier Monsieur Frédéric Martyr, donc le directeur du projet Bridging the Gap, pour donc cette invitation qui offre au Sénégal une opportunité donc de partager l'expérience de la carte d'égalité des chances. Nous restons disponibles dans le cadre du benchmarking pour le partage de documents pour poursuivre la réflexion. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. There's been a number of questions. I'm not sure how we're going to deal with that. But thank you, Mr. Director. We are going to move to the next speaker, who is Marcel Nkurayija from the Rwanda National Disability Council of Persons with Disabilities. Marcel, are you available?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. I hear you.
Okay, please. Okay, please proceed. Would you please also keep your presentation to the allotted time of 12 minutes?
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. As the director said, I'm Raija Marcel, a health and counseling specialist. I'm working from National Council of Persons with Disability Here I'm going to present Disability Management Information System. National Council of Persons with Disability. Thank you. National Council of Persons with Disability was established in 2010. NCPD represents views of persons with disability and is a forum for advocacy and social mobilization on issues affecting persons with disability to build their capacity and ensure participation in the national development. NCPD is assist the government of Rwanda to implement programs and policies that benefit persons with disability and strengthens the disability network in Rwanda. Disability issues in Rwanda. There is a lack of disability data. Although UNPRPD was ratified in 2008, identification of persons with disability based on medical model only once in 5 years. There is a lack of knowledge about barriers and needs of persons with disability. There is a lack of support to persons with disability who are most in need. Absence of use of international validated instruments such as Washington Group Question. No overview of disability information and services providers. Children with disability under 5 years not captured in data collection. Disability is not seen as eligible criteria for social protection. DMIS projects to develop a digital information system which will support NCPD and the key stakeholders for evidence-based policy, for increased accountability, for improved disability services delivery, and better coordination. Ultimately, to improve living conditions of persons with disability in Rwanda. Key functions of disability management information system. First one is the identification of all persons with disability in Rwanda, including children, as well as working children in our data. Assessment of barriers, needs, and priority of persons with disability. Another function, a database for all stakeholders in Kinyarwanda and English. This database will be accessible for all stakeholders. It will show an interactive dashboards and map with all relevant Sustainable Development Goal indicators. It will help to in the management of case management support for those most in needs. It will give an information of disability information and services, including a chatbot. It will link, it will be linked with relevant government of Rwanda database for social support. Overview of DMIS. In the overview, this is the work framework for disability management information system. It has 3 components, which the first component is identification of persons with disability, general information, with demographic information, household information, health status, educational background, livelihood, and social protection, life, categorization of persons with disabilities by showing degree of disability, using Washington group questions, and in identification component, we will have cause of disability. Identification framework, identification component 2, we will have an information on assistive devices, well-being of persons with disability, environment, barriers, and needs. The second component is the case management. On case management, individual needs for persons with disability in CBR or CBID areas, such as in health, education, livelihood, and social life. It will help in individual support plan for persons most in need, those with severe disability. It will play a role of referral to adequate support in all CBR or CBID elements. It will play a role of monitoring and evaluation of individual support plan. The third component is the disability services in Rwanda. Services, we show overview of disability informational assistance and reports and the plans of access through DMIS. And we will continue with the benefits for NCPD, National Council of Persons with Disability. We benefit from DMIS on-demand identification and categorization, real-time dashboard and map on indicators, different indicators. Overview disability plan, no, sorry. Individual support for most in need, and the link to database for social support. For persons with disability themselves will benefit the identification and the registration, check update status, and which will be appearing in the system. ID cards, individual support for most in need, disability information and service available will be accessed through disability management information system. For civil society organization, NGOs, OPD will benefit from registration, certification of services provider, real-time dashboard and map on indicators, uploading annual plans and reports, disability information for research purposes, mapping of all local organization for persons with disability members. For ministry, different ministry will benefit from check status of persons with disability, They will have real-time dashboard maps on sustainable development goals, indicators, overview of disability services providers, comparison with the census data on different levels, link with other databases for social support. This is the whole framework of DMIS. The next slide will show us the output which can be generated, which will be generated from DMIS. This is a map of Rwanda, and those are different indicators, outcome indicators, which can be generated. For example, here we have age. Those are age, job, school, sex. Those are outcome, demographic outcome, which will be generated through DMIS, where you can access job-related information. This is an example. 68% not have a job, 32 access job, and the second one, this one is the information. This one is the information can be generated, which will be generated. Sorry for this slide. Those are different outcome which can be generated. First slide was like the whole picture of Rwanda. The second one is one district in a country. Then this one, this slide is one of district where you can find the range of children between 5 and 11 years data, so that you can go through and you access demographic information related with the children of this range, and you can go through, you can find the data related with the Washington group questions using the barriers, where you can have upper body, praying, saying, hearing, communication, running, walking or climbing, and self-care. Those are the different outcome indicators which can be generated, which will be generated from disability management information system in one of district, if you are at a district level. So you can be at a grassroots level, where you can be at a sector level. Even at a sector level, you are working at a sector level, you can go through DMIS and you access the data related with that sector. On next slide, for example, here you can access the data from Bumbogo sector, Bumbogo of Gasabo district here in Rwanda, and you can access information related to satisfaction of health, level of education, work status, and rating life. Here on top, we have demographic information. Here we have satisfaction with the health, where here in For example, in red, we have a very dissatisfied. In yellow, we have satisfied, so that you can know how people are rating the services that they are getting. You can have an information related to school, to job or work status in your sector, so that if you wanted to plan any intervention, it can be give the right information to plan according to the needs. For the next slide, this is an example of identification disability card which can be given. This is an example of the first one that we have used now. This one is now using. This is an example of card which can be given from DMIS. And I can let people know that this data collection of information through DMIS will be conducted at grassroots level, where the data collectors will be door to door, so that anyone can be left behind without meeting with the data collectors, so that we will make sure all persons with a disability have access on disability management information system data collection. This is the end of our presentation. This slide shows that what I'm talking about, that the data correction will be conducted at the village level. So this is the end of our presentation. This is the summary of this project, but if anyone interested to have more information, we are here to give the full presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marshall. Thank you. Thank you. I will now hand back to Federico, and we are going to have a short break before that. Federico, is there anything you wanted to add before we have a quick break?
Thank you very much to the speakers, and thank you very much, Director, for the moderation. Just very, very briefly, two things. One, you have been posting some very interesting questions in the chat box. Unfortunately, we're already late, so we do not have time to address them now, but we are collecting them. We are going to send them to the speakers in writing so they can reply in writing, and we will send you the answers as part of the post-event report. So no worries, your questions will be addressed. The other point is, before going to the break, I kindly remind all the speakers and moderators, please, please, please try to stick as much as possible to the allotted time. We are already late and we need to squeeze a little bit of time to complete the agenda as foreseen. So thank you very much for this. Thank you for this very interesting discussion and presentations so far. Move on to a short 10-minute break. We'll be back here in 10 minutes, and Alessia Rogai from IDDC will take over for the moderation of the second panel. Thank you, and see you in 10 minutes sharp.
the way. Being recorded before.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Alessia.
Hi. Well, good morning. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the conference on social protection in Africa, a new path towards inclusion of persons with disabilities. Thank you again to attend this session today. My name is Alessia Rogai, and I'm the Knowledge Management and Learning Coordinator of the project Bridging the Gap, and I will moderate this second panel on social protection and income support. I will give immediately the floor to Kanto Ponja from the African Disability Forum that will introduce this panel, but let me quickly introduce the other guests that will support discussion. Daniel Trum from the National Federation of Persons with Disabilities in Namibia, Fatma Wangare from the Inclusion Africa in Kenya, and Sarah Solomon and Amireka Agido from the World Food Program in Ethiopia. Well, thank you very much to everyone again. I kindly ask you to stay within the 12 minutes set for each presentation and not go too fast to facilitate the work of the interpreters. Kanto, over to you. You have 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Hello, Kanto. Can you hear me? Hello? Kanto, I can see you. You are connected. If you want to take the floor and introduce the panel, please, the floor is yours. Well, I don't know if Kanto has so many probably connection problems. So I'm going through the other panelists. Well, I want to now give the floor to the first speaker of this panel, Daniel Trum, the chair of the National Federation of Persons with Disability in Namibia. Daniel, if you want, I can share my screen and I can show your presentation. That's fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. Let me just see if I can share my screen.
Okay, great.
Okay, so my video is on now. You can see my video now?
No.
Yes, Daniel, we can.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Let me see if I can, okay. And you can see my screen?
No, maybe now. No, Daniel, I cannot see your screen. Okay. Now,
you can see it now?
Yeah, now, yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, my name is Daniel Trum. I'm the national chairperson of the Federation of People with Disabilities in Namibia. And I'm just going to give an overview of the social protection system in Namibia. Maybe let me start. The first slide is just my name and my title as a chairperson of the Federation. So the second slide is the overall protection system in Namibia. So Namibia is one of the few countries which has an overall system on social protections, which also include persons with disabilities. So the system includes the basic state grant for old age, and that includes persons with disability as well. And we have also child and a special maintenance grant, which include or which covers orphan and vulnerable children, as well as children with disabilities. And we also has war veterans grant for people who get disability through war veterans, and also those the returnees from the liberation struggle. They have also their social protection system. And we also has the retired civil servant pension, the people over the age of 60 who works for the government, and also who works for the parastatal and some of the private sectors. They also has their social protection grant after the retirement. And we also has financial support for students without and with disabilities in Namibia. And let me start with the special maintenance grant, which is the grant which given to the caregiver of the child with disability or below the age of 16 years old. So first of all, the child must be declared by the medical doctor that that is a child with disabilities. And the amount they receive is a total to 15 plus minus 15 US dollars, which is 250 Namibian dollars per month. It's not means of tested, but the value is still low. I think in the near future, it might be increased because we have stayed at 15 US dollars for quite some time now. And then we have a student financial grants. And this is done through the Office of the Disability Affairs, and students with disabilities can be supported or be supported by their study financially. So the grant, this is the grant, but we also has the loan, but that is cover other students. But for students with disability, we give them grant, which include the tuition fee, transport fee, accommodation, and meals for the student with disabilities. So it's not mean tested or positive target, poverty targeted, but it goes to any student with disabilities as long as they qualify to get the grant. And then we have the main one, which is the disability grant. And this is a universal grant. It goes to all persons with disabilities who qualified. And also it's given to the Namibian citizens or permanent residents of Namibia. And this goes to people who is from 16 years old to 59 years old. And the person should be declared as a person with disability by the medical doctors. And the person should has degree of disability should be 51% upwards in order for the person to qualify for disability grant. In another word, if below 51%, the person will not qualify to get the disability grant. So the value of that grant is 75 US dollar, which is equivalent to 1,300 Namibian dollars. But it has been standing there also for the past 2 years now. It used to be increased annual, but the last year and the current year, we did not get any increasement on that. And it's also compatible with work and it's not mean tested, but the person, as long as qualified currently, it does not look whether the person, how poverty is the person or the person is working or not working. So everyone is qualified to get the disability grant. And after 69 years old, and from the age of 60, all people get the old age grant, whether you are a person with disability or not, is not a person with disability, you get the same amount, which is 1.3 Namibian dollar, equivalent to 75 US dollars. So it does not double, but you still receive the same amount, which has received, which is 1.3 Namibian dollar. So, and the person with disabilities who has children under the age of 18, which is mean from 0 to 18 years old, also that the person can also add his or her children under her disability grant for them to receive the special maintenance grant, which is also 15 US dollar or 250 Namibian dollars. So the disability grant is, once you have qualified, is a lifespan grant. We don't do retested or reassessment unless the person has been registered under temporal disability grant. Maybe just to explain on that one, if the doctor assess you that you have qualified for disability grant, but maybe the doctor feel that your disability might not be permanent disability, they put you on the temporal disability grant for 2 years, which you might be reassessed after 2 years to see whether your disability still remain the same, or maybe you have recovered from your disability. Slide 6, which is the main concession. We also has free healthcare, mostly in public health services or government hospitals and clinics. The government also covers some assistive devices like wheelchairs, crutches, and hearing aids, as well as the white canes. But also this one, to explain a little bit, is depend also to the availability of fund. Like currently, the government is not really procuring more assistive devices due to limited financial resources. And also, you might take time to receive your assistive devices due to the long queue of people waiting for their devices. So Persons with Disability in Namibia also has a priority for land. If you want land for your residential house, there is some percentage within the local authorities or local governments for you to get a land for your residential purposes. And also, as per the affirmative action of Namibia, persons with disabilities can have preference in terms of employment over a person without disabilities who has the same qualifications, which is mean some persons with disability can receive preference when they are applying for certain employment. So the Office of Disability Affairs also has some program which ensure that persons with disabilities are also included in the economic empowerment program within their community. Slide 7, it's we also has funeral benefit. This benefit person with disability who receive disability grant. If that person pass on, the person will receive free transport and free coffin for the burial purposes. So, slide 8, which is eligibility. The free healthcare, initially from the beginning, they were only focusing for those who has disability card, which they are using to receive their grant. In another word, it was just focusing for those who receive disability grant, but now it has been extended to accommodate all persons with disability, as long as you can provide, if your disabilities are indicated in your passport or health passport, you don't need to pay for the health services. So an assistive devices also is for all persons with disabilities based on the recommendation or prescription from the doctor. If the doctor recommends that you need to have a wheelchair or you need to have a hearing aid or any assistive devices which you might need, you can also get the assistive devices. Special maintenance grant and disability grant required the disability certificate or the letter from the doctor, which indicated that you qualified for that grant before they register you for the disability grant. A student study grant, it's required a recommendation letter from the Organization of Persons with Disability or any proof, especially the proof which is from the doctor, which indicate you are a person with disabilities. You can qualify for that. So this grant is just to promote is to support the social economic for persons with disabilities in Namibia. So I think in short, that is the presentation from Namibia on the social protection system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So we established the connection with Kanto Ponje from the African Disability Forum to have a short introduction to this panel. Please, Kanto, stay within 5 minutes. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Boa tarde. You can see, I think o meu vídeo não pode ser visto, não aceita. Não sei se consegue me ouvir.
Yes.
Yeah, estou a tentar colocar o documento também, mas não aceita. Ele dá a informação de que não pode iniciar. Mas acho que posso fazer a apresentação assim mesmo. sem visualizar aí. Muito obrigado.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you very much.
Meu nome é Cantol Ponja, sou presidente do Fórum das Associações Moçambicanas das Pessoas com Deficiência. Vou falar um bocadinho sobre a proteção social e inclusão das pessoas com deficiência em Moçambique. Pronto, tenho pouco tempo, mas vou tentar correr. Dizer que nós temos a Constituição da República de Moçambique, que garante direitos iguais, incluindo a proteção das pessoas com deficiência e outras pessoas vulneráveis, não é? E a proteção social tem como objetivo, como sabemos, reduzir a pobreza, garantindo níveis aceitáveis de bem-estar e dignidade das pessoas. Apesar de Moçambique ter níveis de crescimento econômico, mas metade da população vive abaixo da linha de pobreza. Isso significa que muita gente está sendo afetada pela pobreza absoluta por vários fatores, né? Incluindo questões políticas. Temos a questão do Cabo Delgado, por exemplo, dos ataques de Cabo Delgado, dos ataques de centro. Temos a questão dos ciclones, que está a afetar muito Moçambique. E também as questões de prestação de serviços sociais, o desemprego, tudo isto. Também encontramos desvantagens devido às barreiras de natureza ambiental, né, política e de atitudes que são impostas à sociedade. Bom, sentimos que o direito à segurança social também pode concretizar-se mediante a inscrição e manutenção de uma carreira contributiva ao longo da vida. Em Moçambique temos aquilo que chamamos subsídio social básico, que é o governo dá às pessoas com deficiência mensalmente, que é um valor correspondente a mais ou menos $7. Mas nós verificamos que esse valor é dado mais às pessoas idosas, às pessoas com deficiência, que também são carentes, que vivem na situação de pobreza, pouco recebem este valor e chega a levar 3, 4 anos na lista de espera. Também temos o INAS, que é o Instituto Nacional de Ação Social, que é o implementador do Ministério do Gênero e Criança e Ação Social também, que providencia meios de compensação como canadianas, próteses e cadeiras de roda. E, infelizmente, não há uma regularidade de dar às pessoas com deficiência, ou aqueles que necessitar ter a um tempo útil, porque a própria instituição recebe muito pouco desses meios, além de que não tem qualidade, não temos serviços de manutenção, não tem acessório, então torna-se um problema muito grande para as pessoas com deficiência. Nos últimos anos, vários passos foram dados para facilitar o aumento do número de inscrições, mas que infelizmente até agora não é satisfatória. Apesar dos altos níveis de pobreza, apenas 4% de pessoas com deficiência em Moçambique têm acesso aos programas de proteção social, mas persiste a dificuldade de identificação de potenciais beneficiários com deficiência. Entre o grupo de pessoas com deficiência, predominam as pessoas com deficiência física e visual, em detrimento de outros grupos marginalizados. Também as pessoas com deficiência têm sido sistematicamente excluídas da participação na formulação e implementação de políticas sociais e econômicas que lhes afetam. Como medidas corretivas, o movimento de pessoas com deficiência tem defendido abordagens que combinam com incorporação de perspectivas de deficiência e direitos humanos em todos os programas de desenvolvimento e na promoção de programas específicos para empoderar e incluir as pessoas com deficiência nos programas do governo, a vários níveis e na sociedade no geral. Também há uma necessidade de garantia da implementação de programas e planos de ação conducentes a assegurar a concretização dos direitos específicos, promovendo o apoio de forma concertada às pessoas com deficiência. O governo deve assumir, pensamos nós que a tarefa do governo assumir a realização de ações concretas e programas tendentes a garantir a concretização dos direitos básicos da pessoa com deficiência, através de uma correta articulação multissetorial e multidisciplinar, envolvendo as suas instituições, mas também entidades privadas, organizações não governamentais e pessoas singulares na planificação, implementação e avaliação de ações e programas para a melhoria das condições de vida das pessoas com deficiência. As organizações de pessoas com deficiência devem ser envolvidas de forma ativa na definição de políticas e em todos os programas de planificação, bem como na salvaguarda dos seus direitos. O acesso à informação deve contribuir para que ocorra uma mudança de atitude quanto à questão da deficiência e ser um instrumento decisivo na eliminação de toda espécie de preconceito em relação a pessoas com deficiência. É preciso também que as pessoas com deficiência desempenhem um papel preponderante e contribuam ativamente para garantir a sua participação no desenvolvimento socioeconômico e melhoria da qualidade de vida. Deve ser estabelecidos mecanismos de coordenação entre os setores público, privado e a sociedade no geral para a inclusão e integração social. E para terminar, tenho aqui algumas recomendações, não é? Que achamos que devem ser feitas de forma contínua, ações de advocacia, sensibilização e mobilização da sociedade para a inclusão das pessoas com deficiência. Envolvimento ativo das pessoas com deficiência em atividades da advocacia, divulgação e informação dos seus direitos, garantindo-lhes assistência, solidariedade e responsabilidade social. Também achamos importante a existência de políticas e planos, assim como existem as convenções. Temos a Convenção sobre os Direitos das Pessoas com Deficiência que Moçambique ratificou em 2012, e que também é um instrumento de proteção das pessoas com deficiência e é preciso que seja domesticado e as pessoas com deficiência usufruam a igualdade de oportunidade dos seus direitos. Também sentimos que é importante a garantia de que as necessidades básicas das pessoas com deficiência sejam respondidas, elevando suas capacidades para que possam participar em igualdade de oportunidade na tomada de decisões e contribuir para o desenvolvimento do país e das suas vidas. Bom, tenho pouco tempo, tive que correr para fazer esta pequena apresentação e muito obrigado. Espero que a mensagem tenha chegado da melhor forma. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Canto. I'm sorry if I go fast, but I will like to give immediately the floor to the next panelist of this session, Fatma Wangare from the Inclusion Africa in Kenya. Fatma, if you want, I can share my screen and show your presentation.
Yes, please, Alessia. Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. As you've heard, my name is Fatma Wangare from Inclusion Africa, which is a regional network of people with intellectual disabilities and their families, and the regional network of Inclusion International. I am humbled to participate in this forum this afternoon. My presentation will focus on my experience and reflections in being part of an organization of persons with disabilities among a few other organizations who are involved in the identification and targeting of persons with disabilities in the COVID-19 Response Fund. Next slide, please. I will take you through very briefly on social protection and pre-COVID-19 in Kenya. So in Kenya, we have a social program known as Inua Jamii, which translates to either support a family or support a community. The objective of Inua Jamii is to, one, provide a social protection system through regular and predictable cash transfer to poor and vulnerable households, and two, to build their capacity to live together. So the program includes cash transfers for, one, older persons, two, orphans and vulnerable children, and three, persons with severe disabilities. And here on severe disabilities, there is a condition to it, which is on the tenets of incapacity to work and in need of care. So while the identification and targeting for older persons and orphan and vulnerable children is very flexible and done at the community level, this is not the same for persons with disabilities. So for persons with disabilities, the process is quite tedious and not free at all. For a person with disabilities to be assessed and registered, one has to, one, book an appointment at any public gazetted hospital, and in most cases it's hospitals from level 4 and 5. This means that these hospitals are in towns and cities, which is not even quite accessible to many persons with disabilities and their families. And two, thereafter, after one books an appointment, one will be seen by a medical board. And in most hospitals, the board sits once a month. So for example, the hospital which is very close to where I stay, the board only meets once every first Monday of the month. Then during the day of, the medical assessment, one will be expected to pay, and the fee differs between one hospital to another. In some hospitals is $3, and some hospitals is as high as $10. Then after the medical board sees a person with a disability, they will do a report, and the report will be forwarded to the Ministry of Health at the headquarters, which is in Nairobi. After the medical, board forwards the report will be confirmed and signed by the Director of Medical Services. And then the final process is that, the application will be sent to the National Council for Persons with Disabilities in Nairobi. And therefore the issuance of the card will be done there. So looking at this whole process, it takes about 6 weeks, some people up to even 1 year to get a disability card. And therefore, if we are saying a disability card or the registration is a prerequisite to cash transfer, the process then needs to be simplified and be accessible at the community level. So looking at the disbursements, they are done every other month to the household. This has its own set of challenges on the frequency of disbursement, but also very importantly, the other challenge is how does the disbursement to the household promote autonomy, choice, and control of persons with disabilities in these particular households. Looking at the numbers reached and the amounts provided, we can see they are still very low. And just like a drop in the ocean, so more needs to be done to realize an inclusive social protection system in Kenya. So the numbers reached so far is 5% of persons with significant disabilities in the country, which is about 52,000 persons with severe disabilities. And the amount given every month is $20 US. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So looking at... Let's go back to COVID-19 response to persons with disabilities and their families, the previous slide.
Sorry, could you turn off your microphones, please? Oh, sorry, Fatma, you can go ahead.
It's okay. Can we go back to the previous slide on COVID-19 response to persons with disabilities and their families? Thank you. So looking at COVID-19 response to persons with disabilities and their families, in April, May of 2020, the government through the National Council for Persons with Disabilities did set aside 200 million Kenya shillings to cushion 33,333 persons with disabilities against the effect of the pandemic. This was a short-term cash transfer of 3 months between June to August 2020. And the amount given was just the same as the regular cash transfer, which is $20 per person for 3 months. The criteria for the COVID-19 fund was, 1, the household must be poor, not benefiting from any other government cash transfer, have valid identity card and active telephone number. Priority was given to households with multiple vulnerability, sorry for that. E.g., a household which had, multiple persons with disabilities and probably maybe a person with a chronic illness. And then another priority was that it was given to people who have cerebral palsy, people with intellectual disabilities, and people with multiple disabilities. Next slide. So the way it was implemented was that the targeting was done at the community level through a multi-agency approach. And personally, the way I came to know about this process is that it was through a WhatsApp group platform where we have an officer working at the National Council, is a member of the WhatsApp group. And she did post this information that there's this fund that organizations are encouraged to be part of targeting and the identification process. She also shared in the group an application form that we were supposed to use to do the identification process. So immediately we got this information, quite a number of us in the group. We did disseminate the information at the community level through our community leaders. And we informed them that, the process has to start immediately. We have to start engaging with the multi-agency approach. The people who are among people, the multi-agency team is that we had social welfare officers. We had, local administration officers like the local chiefs, the local elders in the community. And therefore, our role then was to support people with disabilities to fill in the forms, get recommendation letters for the ones who needed them. What we learned from the process is that, 1, for those who are already registered with the National Council, what we were required to do was to attach a copy of the disability card. And for those who are not registered, the chief had to give a recommendation letter to those particular people for them to, to be considered for the funding. Data validation was done using national safety net programs and integrated population registration systems. And this was done for authentication and checking on duplicates. So one thing I can say I learned from, the process, one positive thing is that, there was room for engagement and negotiations with the multi-agency. There was a lot of awareness raising that we did within, the multi-stakeholder agency. And I can remember, like, in some instances, we had, people with psychosocial disabilities and intellectual disabilities and other invisible disabilities like deaf, who had been refused, recommendation letters by the chiefs. And we really had to engage the chief to make them understand and to look broadly at disability from a social lens, which was, quite encouraging. And again, here I must say that, for many people with invisible disabilities, like intellectual and psychosocial disabilities, they are denied registration with the medical board on the pretense that, they don't have a disability since the disability is not visible So this process was quite even important at the community level, just to create awareness among the multi-stakeholder agency, just for them to understand that, you see, you know, we should start looking at support needs and the barriers to participation, and therefore give recommendations for the cash transfer. One of the negative things that I can pick from, you know, the exercise was that, you know, decisions on who to enroll for the specific COVID-19 cash transfer was made elsewhere. We were not part of the decisions that were being made, and therefore to date, we still have answers to give to persons with disabilities at the community level who didn't benefit from the COVID-19, you know, cash, because somebody is asking you, like, why did, you know, group member A get the fund and me, I didn't get, and, you know, like our vulnerabilities, I think we qualified for the cash transfer, but therefore we don't even have answers to give to, you know, quite a number of people with disabilities at the community level. So as I conclude, it is important to note that, you know, there are plans to scale up and enroll people who are within the COVID-19 cash transfer to the regular cash transfer. And therefore we remain optimistic that we are going to be fully included in the process right from the onset, to even just making decisions on, you know, what criteria is being used for people to be enrolled in the cash transfer program in Kenya. And with those few words, thank you for listening to me. Back to you, Alicia and Canton. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Fatma, for your really interesting presentation. I will give the floor immediately to the last but not least presentation of this panel. So we'll give the floor to Sarah Solomon and Amarek Agidu from the World Food Program in Ethiopia. So, well, Sarah and Amarek, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll be presenting. I'm Sarah. I work as a protection officer at WFP Ethiopia. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Have I shared my screen?
Yes,
Hello?
we can see it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Within WFP, we have developed a WFP Disability Inclusion Strategy. It's a 2-year roadmap from 2020 to 2021, and it's already approved by Executive Board in November 2020. And this disability inclusion strategy roadmap was developed from the United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategy, which was launched by the Secretary General in April. Based on that, the major objective of this 2-year disability roadmap is to support the implementation of WFP's approach to addressing the rights of persons with disabilities. WFP has identified 4 of the 15 proposed indicators by the UN Disability Strategy. These are particularly relevant and which can be realistically delivered in 2 years. These are leadership, programs and projects, procurement and capacity strengthening. These are the priorities that WFP want to implement. We also use the IASC Disability Inclusion Guideline, which has 4 objectives, which reflect those in the UNDIS. These are guidance, capacity, accountability, and participation. Based on the disability inclusion roadmap, we have developed a work plan. Our work plan focuses on leadership. This is to collaborate with disabled people's organizations in disability mainstreaming and interaction. We also want to track and monitor performance to ensure that WFP is accountable for its efforts in the inclusion of persons with disability. We also carry out a disability We also planned to carry out disability gap assessment of WFP to identify ways to ensure that assistance is more accessible to persons with disability. Most of the time, WFP is engaged in food and cash transfer. So we want to carry out disability gap assessment in our interventions. Under programs and projects, we also plan to incorporate disability inclusion. We want to facilitate a reasonable accommodation for persons with disability, so as to enhance access to food assistance. We also want to conduct community outreach and awareness activities to be tailored in a way that's easily accessible to persons with disabilities, including inclusive awareness materials, representation of disabled persons in project food committees, engagement of disabled persons organizations. We also want to build the capacity of the government, who most of the time do the targeting for food assistance. We also facilitate inclusive targeting, enhance the voice of people with disability in decision making and disability sensitive programming by consulting them during targeting. Under our program of capacity development of staff partners and government counterparts, we have partnered with ADA, Austrian Development Agency, and we were able to train more than 87 staffs in 4 rounds. After that training, we also discussed with Austrian Development Agency, and we conducted trainers of training for 14 WFP staffs who work in different regions. So we expect that these staffs will be providing this training for our government counterparts and cooperating partners. So most of the activities we implemented revolved around our programs. These are, for example, accessibility was one of our focus. So timely and accessible information has become even more crucial in times of the COVID-19 pandemic, in which diminished services and isolation are disproportionately impacting persons with disability. Due to this, easy to read materials were prepared within WFP's operational context and mandates. We want to make sure that persons with disability get information. So easy to read version of the 2020 Protection and Accountability Policy is also developed. So these are some of the activities we have been implementing. We started these activities in 2019, so we are progressing step by step. Over to you. Hello?
Hello? Hello, Sarah?
Yes, I have finished my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. So we arrive at the end of this second panel. So now we have, thank you very much to all the panelists and also to Canto from the African Disability Forum. Now we have a long break, about 30 minutes. So we will start again in half an hour. So thank you very much again to everybody.
Participants and speakers and moderator of these panels are ready. Panel discussion number 3 on inclusive healthcare and social protection at the crossroad. Moderator and rapporteur Judith Ekaete. Judith, are you here ready? Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me? I am here.
Yes, wonderful, Judith. So we can start, I believe. I'm just checking if Sido Umaru is also with us. Sido, tu es là?
He has an issue with internet, Federico,
okay.
And I will speak on behalf of him.
Fantastic, thank you, Al-Radi. So maybe I will just leave it to Judith to begin. And in the meanwhile, I guess that all the other participants will join back. Judith, over to you and enjoy the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, and welcome to panel discussion 3 on inclusive healthcare and social protection at a crossroad. Inclusive healthcare and social protection at a crossroad. I have a wonderful panelist here, but Sido will be taking us through the introduction of this discourse. But I have Aruna Kakfondo, I have Jolio Buron, and I have Fobe Yangudi. Please pardon me if I did not pronounce your names very well. So because we have very limited time for this conversation, let me just tell you that you have 12 minutes for each speaker, but when it's about 10 minutes, I'll be back to check on you, and I hope that we can keep to time. So without wasting so much time, I want to hand over to Sido to take us through what we have for this panel, an introduction to this panel. Sido, are you there?
Hi, Judith. This is Aradi Abdullah from International Disability Alliance. I will be speaking on behalf of Sidao because he has an issue with the internet.
Thank you.
So I will do my intervention in Arabic.
Okay, Aradi, sorry, before we begin, just I have been asked by Carmen if you can turn on your camera if you have one.
Okay. السلام عليكم. الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة في أغلب الأحيان هم لديهم صرف عالي فيما يتعلق بحصولهم على الصحة وعلى وصولهم للعلاج والعمليات إلى آخره من المستلزمات الطبية. بالإضافة إلى ذلك الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة لديهم بعض المتطلبات المتعلقة بإعاقتهم مثل الأجهزة التعويضية والأجهزة المساعدة وعمليات التأهيل الطبية وبعض الخدمات الطبية المتخصصة المتعلقة بالإعاقة. في غالب الأحيان هذه الخدمات عالية التكلفة وفي معظم الأحيان هي ليست مدمجة ومشملة في برامج الحماية الاجتماعية. بالإضافة إلى ذلك معظم الأنظمة الصحية في أفريقيا هي أنظمة غير ممكنة الوصول، فبالتالي في بعض الأحيان يتطلب الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة أن يذهبوا بعيدا للحصول على مستشفيات ممكنة الوصول وسهلة وميسرة الوصول. بالإضافة إلى ذلك الوصول إلى المستشفى ذات نفسه غير ممكن الوصول في بعض الأحيان، حيث أن نظام المواصلات العامة غير ميسر وفيه كثير من العقبات. بالتالي بعض الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة يحتاجون إلى أن يستأجروا عربات خاصة للوصول إلى تلك المستشفيات. كل ما ذكرناه من أسباب يضيف تكلفة كبيرة على الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة ويجعل الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة في وضعية أنهم يدفعون مزيد من التكلفة الاقتصادية، وبالتالي هم في حوجة أكثر لأنظمة صحية مدعومة بواسطة أنظمة الرعاية الاجتماعية والحماية الاجتماعية. بالتالي نحن نهدف إلى أن يكون لدينا برنامج رعاية صحية، برنامج حماية اجتماعية هو يدعم كل الوصول الشامل للعلاج وللصحة وللعمليات لكل الأفراد بما فيهم الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة، ولكن بالإضافة إلى ذلك قد نتطلب أن يكون لدينا برنامج حماية خاص متعلق بالأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة حتى يغطي هذه التكاليف الإضافية المرتبطة بالإعاقة. بكل تأكيد لو كانت لدينا أنظمة صحية ممكنة الوصول، ذلك يؤسس ويدعم ويخفف من التكلفة وصول الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة للعلاج وللمستشفيات. ولكن في ظل الظروف الحالية الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة كما ذكرت يدفعون تكلفة إضافية عالية ولديهم تكلفة مرتبطة بإعاقتهم بالإضافة لحق، فذلك يؤثر على وصولهم لحقهم في الصحة. المأمول والتوصيات من هذه الندوة أو الاجتماع أن يكون هنالك برنامج حماية اجتماعية يشمل التغطية الطبية الكاملة لكل مستلزمات الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة والوصول للصحة، بما في ذلك برامج التأهيل الطبي المرتبط بالإعاقة، وبما ذلك الأجهزة التعويضية، وبما في ذلك العمليات والمستلزمات الطبية والخدمات الطبية المتخصصة المرتبطة بالإعاقة. هذا البرنامج إذا يجب أن يكون برنامج عام وشامل لكل المواطنين بما فيهم الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة، ولكن في بعض الأحيان كما ذكرت لدينا توصية أن يكون هنالك برنامج متخصص وبرنامج إضافي لتغطية التكلفة الإضافية المرتبطة بالإعاقة في الوصول للخدمات الطبية. الوصول للخدمات الطبية وتغطية برنامج الخدمات الطبية يجب أن يكون شامل، ويجب أن يكون هو أولوية لدى الحكومات في أفريقيا، لأن الوصول للصحة هو واحد من الحقوق الأساسية، وهو قد يؤثر على بقية الحقوق كلها بما في ذلك الحق في الحياة ذات نفسها. لذلك واحد من أهم التوصيات إنه يجب أن يكون هنالك برنامج شامل لتغطية برنامج شامل للحماية الاجتماعية لتغطية الخدمات الصحية، أن يكون هنالك برنامج متخصص وإضافي لتغطية الخدمات الصحية المرتبطة بالإعاقة، بما في ذلك خدمات التأهيل وخدمات الأجهزة التعويضية والخدمات الطبية المتخصصة، وأن يكون ذلك شاملا لكل الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة كأولوية لبرامج الحماية الاجتماعية. شكرا، أتمنى أن أكون توفقت في ذكر متطلبات منظمات الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة. نتيح الفرصة لمتحدثين آخرين كي يطلعون على بعض التجارب في البلدان الأفريقية. شكرا، تحياتي. Hello?
Judith? I don't know if we have perhaps lost Judith's connection, so sorry to jump in, but thank you, Aradi, for your introduction. I would move on to Secretary, Permanent Secretary Aruna Kafando of the Commune Handicap Burkina Faso. Monsieur Kafando, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, merci. Merci. Je suis Aruna Kafando, secrétaire permanent du Commune de Handicap. Je dois échanger avec vous sur la certification du handicap.
Monsieur Kafando? I'm afraid we have lost connection with the Secretary General Kafando. So maybe any attempt to lose much more time, I would move on to the second speaker perhaps, and then we can try to go back to Mr. Kafando. listening to somebody in the background, but I don't know who's speaking. Okay, I will perhaps move on to Jalil Oberon Odom, National Coordinator for Inclusion Ghana, who will intervene on extension of health insurance to persons with disabilities and Disability Common Fund in Ghana. Jalil, could you hear me? Sweet.
Yes, I can hear you.
Please.
Okay. So I want to share my screen. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm very much humbled to be part of this process and to share with you the experience of Ghana. Pretty much, I'll be talking about the Ghana's health insurance and the Disability Common Fund. In terms of the national health insurance, in Ghana, it is a standalone social protection program, as well as is also a complementary program that supports other programs. But pretty much in terms of what it is a social health protection policy that was initiated by government of Ghana to secure financial risk protection against the cost of healthcare services for all residents in Ghana. And prior to 2003, there was a cash and carry system which Ghana was implementing in healthcare. And so when Ghana decided that it was going to implement this social health protection policy, it established a law which was adopted by Parliament in 2003 called the Act 650, which responded, to the needs, of this particular policy. It is called the National Health Insurance Scheme. And in the Act, it has a component that allows persons with disability to access free healthcare. And that means that for persons with disability, we don't pay premium, to access, the national health. I mean, in terms of going to the hospital and everything else. And I mentioned that the National Health Insurance Scheme is also complementary to other programs. There's a program called the Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty program, which is also a social intervention, as a cash transfer program that allows government to target poor households and support them with some cash transfer. And this National Health Insurance Scheme, tends to be a complementary program that supports the household beneficiaries. And so, like I mentioned, the Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty program has the specific objectives to improve basic household consumption and nutrition, to increase access to healthcare, but also to increase basic school enrollment, attendance, and retention, and also to facilitate access to these complementary, services. But when it comes to persons with disabilities, the targeting in this particular program is only those with severe disabilities without productive capacity. So you can understand that it is targeted at only a very small group of persons with disability. First, you must have a severe disability, and you must also be without productive capacity. In terms of the exemption policy for this national health insurance, we have several people who are exempted. There are those who, do not pay premium at all, and those who do not pay processing fee. But as well, we have those who pay premium and then processing fee. But I'll focus on, why we are here, persons with disability. Persons with disability fall under the indigent group, which basically means that they are categorized under the poor, persons in Ghana. And so this is where they are categorized. But then you also have other categorization where persons with disability fall. And i.e., we have the LEAP, which I mentioned, the livelihood empowerment against poverty beneficiaries. We have also persons with speech, visual, and hearing impairment. Then we have the Ghana School Feeding Program, which is also an area that government intervenes in terms of social protection. And so all these, exemptions categories, persons with disabilities fall under. But unfortunately, that means that in terms of database, you are having a lot more, categorization instead of having, a standalone, persons with disabilities. In terms of the challenges of this particular scheme, it is perceived that this scheme, from a general perspective, is taken from a general perspective instead of selectively addressing the specific needs of persons with disability. This is because aids for persons with disability, including spectacles, hearing aids, wheelchairs, and the likes, are actually excluded from the National Health Insurance list of medication and free assistive devices. There's no free assistive devices, by the way. And in terms of the medicine too, we only have medicine for mental health patients and mental disability persons. Again, in terms of provision of sign language interpretation at health facilities, there is also a problem where the deaf has not been factored in the National Health Insurance. This challenge prevents the deaf from accessing good health care, and consequently, this affects their health status. There's also difficulty in identifying the different types of disability for registration. So at a very local level, there's so much problem. It's fraught with so much problem when it comes to identifying, the obvious disability. The obvious disabilities are known, but of course, the invisible ones are very difficult to identify with. And then we have issues of network connectivity, which obviously affect the registration of persons. And so many persons with disabilities are left out and so are not able to access the free healthcare as it is. In terms of funds, there's also inadequate funding, from the Ministry of Gender, which is the host ministry that provides logistics for the registration of beneficiaries of those who are on the LEAP, program and the school feeding program, which are all social protection programs. Then we have the issue of accessibility challenges. If you look at these pictures, for those who can see the pictures, you notice that accessibility is a very big problem. So getting someone in wheelchair to get to these places of registration, and the prerequisite is for you to register before you can enjoy free healthcare. So that is also very problematic. Now, talking about the 3% Disability Common Fund, Ghana has been a signatory to the CRPD and being the 119th state to ratify the CRPD and its optional protocol in 2012. Sorry for writing the 2011. In fulfilling this obligation and in complying with this CRPD, the government of Ghana actually instituted what we call the District Assembly Common Fund for persons with disability. And this common fund is actually a cash transfer social insurance program that is targeted at the social and economic development of persons with disabilities. It is actually a 3% allocation of the total District Assembly Common Fund that is actually transferred from the central government to the district assemblies quarterly. In terms of eligibility or how people are targeted, eligibility is usually determined based on the categories of disability or explanation of who persons with disabilities are contained in our Persons with Disability Act of 2006. And in terms of the definition that the Act gives for persons with disabilities, says it is an individual with a physical, mental, or sensory impairment, including visual, hearing, or speech functional disability, which gives rise to physical, cultural, or social barriers that substantially limits one of the major life activities of that individual. As a result of this definition, any assessment of eligibility is actually dependent on this definition. And so if you look at people with albinism who are considered as persons with disability in Ghana, obviously they may have challenges assessing it at a local level. And then you have also people with intellectual disability who most at times you have family members representing them, you know, also having challenges of assessing this fund. However, we say that persons with disability who are of good economic or financial standing will not benefit from this at all. This fund is not for the rich. And so it is just those who are poor. In selecting beneficiaries, districts generally rely on a database of persons with disability under their jurisdiction. However, these databases can only be described as a collection of names at best. In terms of the disbursement guidelines, we have 6 thematic areas which are stipulated in the guidelines that is used for disbursement. 1, they look at advocacy or awareness raising on the rights and responsibilities of persons with disability. They look at strengthening of OPWDs, that is looking at organization development of various organizations of persons with disabilities. It looks also at training in employable skills or apprenticeship for persons with disability. Then it looks at income generation activities, those who want to do some work or petty trading, whatever that may be, you can apply for the fund. And then also some educational support for children, students, and trainees with disability. And then it also looks at health, where there's provision of technical aids, assistive devices, and equipment. Generally, if you look at the actual common fund, the amount dispersed hovers around 91.44% of the dispersed funds. The others is usually looked at some administration cost. So in terms of access to healthcare, rehabilitation, and assistive devices, the common fund is instrumental in widening access to healthcare for persons with disability. Moreover, although the amount received by beneficiaries has varies depending on the district, the fund has largely been useful in ensuring access to rehabilitation services. Again, in addition, persons with disability purchase assistive devices such as white canes, eyeglasses, magnifiers, screen readers, orthopedic shoes, clutches, walkers, calipers, and also some hearing aids using this common fund. Finally, talking about challenges of this common fund. Studies shows that the economic and social situation of persons with disability can become better when the most vulnerable are identified and assisted in the face of resource limitation. However, in Ghana, you can see that the problem is difficult for persons with disability, and this goes against the needs of persons with disability. It has been found through studies that majority, 80.7% of beneficiaries of this common fund indicated, have problems when it comes to selection criteria, as they usually consider capacity of applicants to perform activities of daily living. This means that the most vulnerable PWDs have no access to the fund because they are deemed as not able to utilize the disbursed resources. And finally, beneficiaries of this fund receive an average of $38. We feel that this is insufficient to undertake economic empowerment or income generating activities or to take care of healthcare. This, I think, is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jalil, for your insightful presentation. It's very interesting to learn more about Ghana. And I will try to go back to Permanent Secretary Aruna Kafando from Burkina Faso. He had some communication issues before, troubles with the internet connection. Can Mr. Kafando, are you now available, Mr. Kafando? Okay, this silence is not very promising, I'm afraid. So I move on to the third speaker of this panel discussion on inclusive healthcare and social protection at a crossroad, Ms. Phoebe Nyagudi, Deputy Director for Social Development, the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection of Kenya, intervening on increasing access to assistive devices in Kenya. Ms. Phoebe?
Yes,
can
sir.
You hear us?
Yes, I can.
Please, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I have my slides?
Yes, okay, just let me 1 second since I
will do it. I will do it.
Okay, Alicia, can you? Yes, thank you very much.
Can you enlarge it, please? More?
Can you see the screen?
Can you make it bigger, please? Can it be bigger?
Honestly, I don't know how to do it.
No, I think that you can enlarge it on your screen.
Mine?
Yes.
Or I use my own?
As you wish, but I'm sorry, I think that bigger than that cannot be made, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you very much. My name's Phoebe Nyagudi. I'm a Director for Social Development in charge of disability development programs and rehabilitative services. I work in the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, in the State Department of Social Protection, Department of Social Development. I'm going to address you on increasing access to assistive devices in Kenya. The Ministry of Labor and Social Protection is one of the ministries in the Kenyan government where disability programs and services are domiciled. Service provision to persons with disabilities in Kenya is guided by policy provisions in various international instruments, national policies, and legislation, among them being the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Sustainable Development Goals, African Protocol on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, East African Policy on Persons with Disabilities, the Constitution of Kenya, the Persons with Disabilities Act of 2003, which is currently under review, the draft national policy for persons with disabilities, and the public service guidelines on mainstreaming disability at the workplace. So these are the instruments, the legal instruments that guide the provision of services to persons with disabilities in Kenya. When we look at the Persons with Disabilities Act of 2003, Section 33, subsection 2D, puts an obligation on the Board of Trustees of the National Development Fund for Persons with Disabilities to provide or contribute to the cost of assistive devices and services to persons with disabilities. The fund was operationalized in the first medium term of Vision 2030, that was in the year 2008-2009. So in Kenya, assistive devices and services are any product or service designed to enable greater independence for persons with disabilities. The fund gives priority to those who require assistance to participate in learning, training, or in work environments. The the government allocates funds through the National Council for Persons with Disabilities to a tune of 40 million every year, which is equivalent to 365,531 US dollars for the purchase of various assistive devices for persons with disabilities. And out of this allocation, 2% of it is allocated or set aside for rehabilitating those who acquire disability while in their workplace. Example of this devices include, as has been mentioned by my the early presenter, they include wheelchairs, crutches, hearing aids, braces or calipers, surgical boots, prosthetic arms and legs. And examples of assistive services include sign language interpretation, guides, readers, wheelchair handlers, human support for persons with intellectual or psychosocial disabilities. The National Council for Persons with Disabilities gives service providers funds. Actually, when you talk about these assistive devices in Kenya, it is not just being done by the government. It is done by the government, where the government is giving, actually coordinating the whole, program of the provision of assistive devices. But it consists of many non-governmental organizations and some of the DPOs, yeah, that are very key in the provision of these assistive devices to persons with disabilities. In the government, we have our own a state corporation known as the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, which sometimes give money to various service providers to help them in the provision of these devices. But the service providers themselves also have their own monies. They also mobilize their own resources for this particular service. So apart from the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, we have the National Fund for the Disabled of Kenya. This is a trustee fund which was established in 1982. And it also provides a lot of devices to persons with disabilities. And if you can see from my slide, you can see that it gives a lot of services. If you look at the table, it gives services for assistive devices and tools of trade. These tools of trade are given to those that have been trained in technical skills, and they are therefore given these tools of skills of trade to help them in starting their own enterprises for income generation. And you can see that in the year 2018-2019, a total of 60 million was given for that particular aspect. And in 2019-2020, it was around 60 million. This comes to around 600 US dollars if we can convert it. And then they also give support to institutions. These institutions are given money to improve the infrastructure. They're given money to buy some equipment to make the learning environment useful or accessible to persons with disabilities. They also provide assistive devices, the technologies that are required, like computers and the rest, in learning institutions. But you can see from my my table that for the year that ended during the COVID, most of this money was converted, to addressing the issues of COVID, where a lot of the money went into the purchase of protective gears. For example, they bought masks, they bought sanitizers, and they bought the water, the boots for hand washing. So most of that money went in that to most of the institutions in Kenya. And we could move on to the process that is used, or the procedure for acquiring these assistive devices. Just as you were told earlier by my sister, Fatima, that you have to be registered. You must go under registration. That process is very tedious in Kenya because everything must be brought back to the headquarters for you to be confirmed to be a person with disability or not, while you have been assessed maybe in your own county. This report has to be sent to the headquarters for the Director of Medical Services to append his signature and confirm that you have a disability. But all is not lost. I think we are really working around this with the National Council for Persons with Disabilities and other stakeholders. I know UDPK, United Disabled Persons of Kenya, is very keen on this. We have Kenya Union of the Blind. We have the Fatuma's organization, KAI. They are all working towards seeing that this thing is decentralized so that people can be registered in their local counties. So that is something that is going on. But for you to be able to access these assistive devices, one thing, you have to fill a form. In Kenya, we have various programs that are being provided for persons with disabilities, but the one for assistive devices is just one program. So there's a form for assistive devices that one has to fill and then attach a photograph. The photograph must be a full photograph to indicate that you have a disability. Somebody must see. If you're using a crutch, you should be in your crutches and you take that photograph because it is a what? It will confirm that you have a disability. And then you must have a medical report that also supports the fact that you need the assistive device and that you are a person that is needy. Apart from that, you also get a letter from your own, from the local administration. They should also indicate that you acquire that device and that it will be good for you. It is unfortunate that sometimes we are given these devices, but you find that persons with disabilities, they go and sell them. So that is why we really want to make sure that the local administrators, they are aware, and that when you are given these things, they ensure that you don't sell these things, that you have them and that you use them. If at all what you are requesting for cannot be provided locally by the service providers, then you must go to where you can get it and attach also a pro forma invoice that indicates where it can be gotten and what it's all about. So that's the procedure that is normally taken in Kenya. So I want to inform you that Kenya participated in the the Global Disability Summit that was held in 2018 in London, and Kenya was a co-host. And you remember that during that year, many government and countries and leaders, they made commitments of what they were to do to ensure that they embrace or include disability in development. Kenya did the same, and one of the areas that Kenya made a commitment on was that it was coming to enhance innovation, technology and innovation. And by doing that, it made a commitment that it would establish an assistive technology hub in Kenya. So this hub was to help in the provision, was to ensure that we would have locally fabricated on large scale this assistive technology that would transform access and affordability of life-changing assistive devices to persons with disabilities. So there is that aspect that is going on. We are in the process of establishing this assistive technology app. But even before this app is established, we have done a lot of mapping of the various players in this area And we now have an ecosystem of the various players in the provision of assistive devices in Kenya. They are working together to ensure that this hub is put in place because this hub will help us in making our own, a home-based, devices that are very relevant to our environment. Sometimes people import the devices, but when they are imported, some of them do not fit within our environment because some of our environments are not very friendly. So for us to be able to establish this assistive hub, we are also in the process of putting in place or establishing an assistive technology policy. This policy is going to guide in the establishment of the hub and also the management of the hub, and at the end of it, it must also put in place some measures that will ensure that we'll have adequate supply of quality, affordable products and have appropriately trained personnel for effective service provision. So that is one of the areas that we are also struggling with in Kenya, that we want to ensure that is put in place. And apart from that, we also want to carry out support needs survey. That is something that is in the pipeline. We have already had a concept note that has been put in place, which is to be shared with various stakeholders. What we really want to do is to carry out this survey to establish the various support needs of persons with disabilities. Yeah, I know we are already giving it. We're only giving cash transfer, and cash transfer is not adequate. It does not address all the needs that somebody may need. So this survey will help us be able to have to be able to know the various needs that are met and the ones that have not been met, and then it will also be able to help us, in now having to put in place designs for a better social protection, schemes that will reach our people. And what we really want to see is that when somebody is given appropriate support, then they'll be able to participate. They will be able to participate in the communities, in the societies, and will be able to do their own businesses. They will be more independent. The other thing that is also going around in Kenya is supported
Miss Phoebe, I'm sorry to jump in. I would just kindly ask you if you can come to a conclusion within a couple of minutes, because we have also the other speakers waiting for their turn. Apologies for the interruption.
Thank you, sir. We also have the final one, sir. What I want to say is we are going to carry out another survey that is supported by WHO, where we want to carry out a survey to establish the various assistive technologies that are required in Kenya, where they can be found, where they are, or where there are gaps. This again will help us in making us able to provide enough, assistive devices that support all the people that require them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Nyaguti. My apologies for interrupting you when you were coming to the end of your presentation, but it was very insightful as well to know more about the work you're conducting in Kenya. Right now, I'll make one final attempt to move to Burkina Faso and to the final speaker of our panel, Permanent Secretary Aruna Kafando. Monsieur Kafando?
Oui, oui, okay. Bonjour.
Super.
OK. Je suis donc Aruna Kafando. Je vais échanger avec vous sur la protection donc, sociale au Burkina Faso en lien avec le handicap. Et surtout en ce qui concerne donc la certification du handicap au Burkina. Et je voulais donc rappeler que le Burkina Faso a ratifié la Convention relative donc, aux droits des personnes handicapées le 23 juillet 2009. Et pour donc son opérationnalisation, il y a eu le vote par l'Assemblée nationale, donc le Parlement, de la loi donc 012-2010 portant donc protection et promotion.
Okay, I'm really sorry and afraid that there has been another connection breakdown with Burkina. Unfortunately, I have been told by Monsieur Kafando that there were troubles today. Monsieur Kafando, can you hear us? Okay. I'm afraid I have to conclude here this this session with much regret for not listening to Monsieur Kafando again. So I'm sorry, but I think that we have to close here the session. Let's take the 10-minute break that we had foreseen in the agenda, and then we will move on to the fourth and final panel of this workshop on inclusive social protection in Africa. Thank you again. My apologies, and especially to the colleagues from Burkina Faso who could not intervene. See you in 10 minutes. Welcome back for the last time today. Okay, so we have come to the fourth and final panel of our workshop for today. panel is dedicated to the fourth component of inclusive social protection, as it was presented by our keynote speakers at the beginning of this workshop, which is right now social protection and access to community support, education, and livelihood. The panel will be introduced by Hatuma Gaku from the African Disability Forum. Hatuma, you have the floor. Of course, if you can hear me. Hatuma? Okay, I don't see Hatuma, so let's do like as we did for the previous panel, where we begin with the first speaker, and then we moved back to the short introduction. So looking at the agenda, the first speaker is Ms. Mustafa, Secretary General of the National Council of Persons with Disability in Sudan. Hatuma, can you hear me now? Now I see you on screen. We cannot hear you. I see you on screen, but I cannot hear you. Okay, do you mind if we move on into the agenda and we try to get back to you after the first speaker? Okay. Thank you. And let's see if in the meantime you may solve your microphone issue. The first speaker is Riyab Mustafa, as I said, but I think I don't see her in the participant list right now, so she may have disconnected. Riyab, are you here by chance? I think not. So I will move on to the second speaker, Luis Lechiguero from the European Union delegation to Ethiopia. Luis, bienvenido. A pleasure to have you with us. And please, you have 12 minutes as discussed. Thank you very much again for your presence.
Thank you very much, Federico. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you to all participants for their patience. I know they are now very tired. I will spare them a PowerPoint presentation. I will just try to be swift. And I've seen that there is a presentation from WFP about their mainstreaming of people with disabilities in the programs in Ethiopia. I have been asked to talk about livelihood for people with disability in Ethiopia, but I think first I should give a little bit of context, if you allow me. How beautiful the translators are. Thank you. Ethiopia, it is the second country in Africa in terms of population, 150 million people. And in terms of people with disability, we don't have clear or accurate data, depending on the definition and sources consulted. I mean, they can be from 1 to 15 million people with disabilities. That's a big segment. There is no census in Ethiopia since 2007. That means that we don't have very good sources to be certain. But for sure, I mean, there might be 8 to 10 million people with disabilities in Ethiopia. That's a big, big community. So, I mean, talking about the economy of Ethiopia, 85% is agricultural. Okay, it is 2/3 of the GDP. And the livelihood commonly is subsistence agriculture. So, I mean, the people with disability we are talking about mainly are in rural areas. This subsistence agriculture includes even the coffee, which is probably the biggest commodity in Ethiopia for export. So even that, it is subsistence agriculture, very basic, rain-fed, okay? But if we read the literature on economy, the big articles on economy, the reports, we see that Ethiopia, it is the African lion in economy. There is an economic miracle in Ethiopia for the last 15 years, with a growth at a rate of 8 to 10% in the last 15 years. Huge. I mean, if we look at the numbers, the economic growth of Ethiopia, it is incredible. It is fantastic. New roads, bridges, stadiums, electricity production plants, dams, including the biggest in Africa, which is just being concluded in the border with Sudan at the Nile River. We have more than 27, that's the plan, but I mean, they are coming soon, 27 industrial parks also. And then you have a metro in Addis, you have a new railway, I mean, you name it. Ethiopia now, it is really an incredible place for new infrastructure. You come one year, you come the next year, and you see now skyscrapers that you have not imagined a few years ago. But I mean, at what price is this economic growth coming in? We can talk about environment, but that's not the purpose of this workshop. So we'll talk about people. What is the price for people? How is the condition and situation of the people? For the whole investment that is being proposed to the international investors, which comes from China, from Middle East, Brazil, Turkey, Europe, I mean, the hook, the catch is cheap energy, cheap land, and cheap labor. But how cheap is the labor? Well, you will be surprised. In Ethiopia, there is no minimum wage. And then from the data source that we handle, the entry salary at the garment, the textile industry, is $30 per month. When we know that in Bangladesh, for example, is 100, the minimum wage for textile, for in garment industry. In China, from 200 to 30 to 300. Even in Afghanistan, is $70 per month. In Ethiopia, there is no minimum wage. So I just want to give you a little bit the context to understand when we go down to the situation of the hope that the people with disability may have to access the labor market. When we talk about social protection, I mean, we have all the policies are there. On paper, all policies, I mean, you name it. I mean, Ethiopia has subscribed, of course, the UN Committee, I mean, the Convention for the Rights of People with Disabilities, the Proclamation for the Rights of Disabled Persons for Employment. I will not mention all. The policies are there. But what is the practice? What is the reality? Only 2% of the population has a pension scheme. And this is so small that people continue working even after 70, 75 years. I mean, you have 43% lacks basic education. I mean, the poverty line that internationally is 1.9 US dollar per day, in Ethiopia, it is calculated in kilocalories, 2,200 kilocalories, which is the minimum energy that a person needs to have a functional life, to have a basic life. So that's the poverty line. And even with that poverty line, there are 23 million people below that line. And as many just sitting on top of that line. So I want you to understand how basic the social protection system is in Ethiopia. It has a policy, as I say, since 2014, there is a very comprehensive policy, including 5 sectors, employment, insurance, access to social services. But as I say, the reality is quite a different one. The African average of people with at least one benefit in social protection is 18%. In Ethiopia, it is 11%. And this is thanks to a project that is called Productive Safety Net Program. Productive Safety Net Program, PSNP. I mean, this is a program that started in 2005 and it covers now 8 million people. Many people still keeps in mind the image of Ethiopia from the 70s and the 80s with images of war, drought, famine. And I mean, it happened in the 70s and the 80s, but in the 90s, things took a turn for the best. And then from the 2000 plus, I mean, the food insecurity situation changed thanks to this program. This was a game changer in the history of Ethiopia. And it was very simple. I will explain to you. It was just all the humanitarian aid that normally it was brought to Ethiopia. The government asked all the different donors, please tell me in advance what you are going to bring. Let's make a program implemented by the government itself, where we are only to add one component, and this is predictability. And I think this is key for social protection, predictability. For the government to know how much resources it can access from the donors, predictability for the beneficiaries themselves. I mean, if you know that you are going to receive a quintal of wheat every month for 6 months, I mean, your life completely changes. You know then how you can spend some money for medicine, for the school. So, I mean, the difference between the humanitarian aid and this program, it is that it was predictable. And so well it worked that yesterday we launched the 5th phase after 15 years. It was a big event with all the precautions against COVID, but it was very well attended by 4 federal ministers, 2 commissioners, all the different DPs, which are now 10, USA, the European Union, Canada, we have the IRIS 8, UNICEF, WFP as well, 10 of them. If you go in Twitter or in the media and you put the hashtag of PSNP or Ethiopian PSNP, you will see all the different basic information of the program. Now it covers 8 million people and is providing public works in exchange of food or cash. Out of these 8 million people, around 15% are direct support beneficiaries who cannot work. And that's where the people with disability comes at the same time as elderly, small children, and women head households. So, I mean, this program now have become also urban. So we are talking about a program that is more than $500 million per year. The investment is small because it doesn't amount more than $50 per person, per beneficiary per year. But with that, and well managed, how it is being managed now by the Ministry of Agriculture, I mean, it's keeping Ethiopia out of the news for food insecurity reasons. In 2011, I mean, there was a very, very severe drought. And in Somalia, more than 150,000 people died. Not in Ethiopia. So really, we have evidence that by building these safety net programs, I mean, the most vulnerable people are being protected. Now the challenge is to build up assets so they can graduate from the program and they can have their own means of living. The urban safety net program is now being moved to 83 cities. And with the same amount of direct support beneficiaries that cannot work, the people with disabilities, elderly, and other vulnerable groups. This is, again, 15% out of 1 million in 83
Luis, sorry
yes?
to jump in. I would just ask you to come to a conclusion in a couple of minutes tops. Thank you very much.
I can do the conclusion, yes. I mean, the government, the different donors can do plenty of things. But I mean, I want to finish with, I mean, just by bringing to light the experience of successful disabled people around the world, and specifically in Ethiopia. Like, for example, we have Jennabers Negushi, which is a blind lawyer, mother, and also recipient of the Right Livelihood Award. And then in her own words, and I want to what she mentions, that the big problem is the mindset. It is not my disability that has made people think that I am unable to do it. It is not by being a woman that had made people consider me a lower than men. All this comes from person's mindset. So the challenge is mindset. I mean, there is another lady, Genet Corcuera, which was adopted from Ethiopia. And then when she was 7 years old, went to Spain and has become the first deaf blind in Europe to achieve and get a degree in a university. So, I mean, we hope that these models, I mean, really challenge everyone working in this community of service, in this community of practice of people with disabilities, and be therein. I mean, it's not time just to wait for the government or the EU or anyone else to do things for them. I mean, like it is said, nothing about them without them. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for if time went too much. Okay, sorry.
No problem. Thank you very much, Luis, for your intervention and for enlarging also a little bit the width of our look onto the topic. Thank you very much. I think that we can move not on, but back this time to the who was supposed to be the first speaker of this panel, Secretary General Rehab Mustafa. I may have spotted you in the participant list, meaning you might be online, but I know also by speaking with Aradi, there are some connection problems over there in Sudan as well. Can you hear me? Can you intervene? Ms. Mustafa? No. Can you hear me? She cannot, so I'll move perhaps to Atuma Gaku, who was supposed to intervene at the beginning and had some issues with the microphone. Atuma? I guess the tiredness of the whole conference is finally overcoming us at the very end of the session. So let's do this, perhaps, Atuma, we leave you, can you? Okay, we can see you again, but at least me, I cannot hear you. I'm very sorry, but I cannot really hear you. And I'm sorry, I have to also move to the other speaker because we're already late, and for the sake of respect of the work of the interpreters, we need to speed up a little bit to move on to the agenda. So I'll move on to Mr. Gracia Olanga from Unicef Mozambique. Mr. Langa speaking on Mozambique's approach to social protection and community support. Gracia?
Thank you very much, dear Federico. I don't know if everyone is listening to me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me try to share my short presentation. So do you see my screen?
We do, yes. You can open it on all screens so we can see it better. But we can see your screen now.
Thank you. Okay, I believe that Mr. Kantol Ponja talked earlier and did the presentation of the Mozambique situation for persons with disability. So for that, I will not take more time talking about the legal framework and the disability context in Mozambique, because I believe that he did very well. So let me start talking about what the country is doing on the reform of the social protection for persons with disability in the country. The main The main document that currently show what ways the country wants to take regarding inclusive social protection is the National Strategy for Basic Social Protection, that is known as ENSSB2, the second strategy, because the first one started from 2010 until 2014. So this second strategy started on 2016 and will end on 2024. So this strategy recognizes that the country have a very low coverage of persons with disability through the social assistance program, and recommends that there will be adjustments, mainly in the basic social subsidy, that is the main cash transfer program in the country. I made to benefit persons with disability, child, elder people. So in this regard, there was a need to revise the eligibility criteria so that the program can manage to cover more persons with disability. So also other intervention that is in place in the country is the establishment of a new program, a new social actions service program that is addressed to respond to social risks such as gender-based violence, social exclusion, marginalization of elder and persons with disability, neglect, and child abuse. So this is a new program that is being designed, and the process of the design is ongoing. I believe that by the end of this year, the government will start discussing with the civil society and development partners on the ways to finalize and start implementation of these ongoing new programs. So let's move on. Yes, talking more deeply in that social service program, the social action service program process, the program aims to respond to multiple social risks, as I said, such as all type of violence against children, women, elderly persons, persons with disability, and provide protection and support for IDPs, and prevent and address sexual exploitation and abuse, among other interventions. So this will be through linkage to services. So not only providing social assistance, but also providing linkage to other services such as health service, education, justice, and other that will be intended to offer protection for those who need. Talking about the UNICEF contribution on this reform. First of all, UNICEF is supporting the government in the design and implementation of the new grants that the government decided to implement, such as the child grant. Now UNICEF is supporting the government in the implementation of the pilot of this child grant in Nampula province. So in this pilot, we are covering something like 15,000 beneficiaries. Other important intervention is to support in the design of the new disability grant, so that in this social subsidy program, there is a need to improve the eligibility criteria for the persons with disability that now are less covered. So we are supporting in this regard and providing support to the revision of operational manual to better cover these new interventions. We are also working with the government to design an identification tool that will be easy to use by the social work service at district level and at the delegation of the National Institute of Social Action that are responsible to implement the cash transfer program. So also in this component of cash transfer, we are working with the government to design a cash plus model, so that not only we will support, the government will support by giving money, but also with an intervention of community support and family support to those who are receiving the cash, so to address other issues that they are facing, not only on the monetary side, but on the social side also. Moving in this UNICEF contribution to inclusive social protection in Mozambique, we are supporting also to design, we supported to develop the concept note of the social action service program. And now we are supporting in the design of the operational manual, as I said. Other intervention that we are working with the government is to develop a comprehensive and broad social protection package for persons with disability that will include other intervention, not only from the cash side, but for the other service, to access to the other service also, so that we can have a more complementary intervention from the cash side and access to service also. And we are working to the costing of the scenario, so that we can help the government to decide in which scenario they will approve and start implementing. Also, we are working on the capacity building of social service on disability inclusive social protection to relevant government stakeholders and social service staff in the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Action, Ministry of Health, and National Institute of Social Action, as well as DPOs and civil society organizations, so that they will be trained on disability inclusive social protection based on the respective role in the system. So there is also a communication package to support government to develop communication package for inclusive social protection, as well as a strategy for its dissemination. And last, we are working, we are supporting the government in the response plan for COVID-19 in social protection for persons, specifically for persons with disability. So in this plan, the government is providing 6-month cash transfer for households with persons with disability as part of the government response. So in general, that's the ways that in Mozambique, inclusive social protection fund is going on. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Graciao. That was very insightful, very interesting also, and enriching to know about the wide contribution UNICEF is bringing to a very dynamic context such as Mozambique's. So thank you very much for taking the time to deliver this presentation. So we are really coming to an end of this conference. I am an optimistic person, and I'd like to just make a very final attempt to connect with Ms. Riyab Mustafa and or Hatumaga Ku for the conclusion of this panel and see if things work. Otherwise, we'll close this conference. Ms. Mustafa, Secretary General, can you hear me? All right, seems like I was too optimistic. So Hatuma, maybe if you have solved your microphone issue, you can just conclude these panel. Otherwise, I will move on to thanking everybody and leaving Alex for a very quick final remark. Yeah, as I said, I think that everybody's getting a little bit overwhelmed and overtired at the end of this conference. I'm sorry, and I apologize with everybody, first of all, for the delay that we had accumulated at the beginning of the session in particular, and for some internet connection issues that have unfortunately affected this conference, but that's the world we live in nowadays. Before I leave to Alex for a quick conclusion, just a big thank from my side personally to everybody who has contributed to the organization and delivery of this conference. It was an extreme pleasure. It has been, of course, very stressful and difficult to put everything together, but I think we can be very happy with the result so far. And many, many, many thanks to the interpreters, both sign language and language interpreters, that have allowed everybody to follow this conference alongside the captioners. We're already very late, so Alex, I leave it to you for a quick final remark. Thank you, everybody, and see you tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Central European Standard Time for the Policy Dialogue Conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Federico. So I won't take much time. I just wanted to highlight a few points, I think, that really came very strongly today through the presentation. And I would build on the Taylor take this morning. We have some good news and we have some less good news, I would say. And on the good news side, I think we can really see that things are moving. If I look back 10 years time, and we had a conversation with Schweb Schalken a few months ago, how different is the conversation? 10 years time, there was no conversation on social protection and disability. But in sub-Saharan Africa, this was not a topic. Today, we had a lot of speakers. We could have had more speakers explaining what's going on and what's taking place. We are talking about disability management information system. We are talking about inclusive humanitarian cash transfer. We are talking about scaling up existing program, creating community support services. Graciano was talking to us about steps towards case management on how to connect cash transfer and support services. All those things are taking place, assistive device, financing. So this is a very different context. On the less good side, I think, and I think Luis gave kind of the big picture aspect around fiscal space, around economic development, and there are some limitations on what government can do. But we believe that a lot of things are possible. They might not be possible from one day to another, but they are possible within 10 years. And I think I wanted to conclude by reminding everybody the 2030 objective and agenda of eradicating poverty and reducing inequality. And I think if you look at especially SDG 10 on reducing inequality for persons with disabilities, it calls on states to take measures to reduce those inequalities. And we are strong believers that actual social protection systems, wherever you start from, and Schwab said it this morning, every country can afford something. Every country can take steps forward. Not everybody starts from the same place. Not everybody has the same prerequisites in place, but every country can move forward. And we will hear more tomorrow about commitments of different organizations and the call for action of the African Disability Forum. And I'm very pleased that we had 65 people right now, 100 plus earlier this morning, that are interested and mobilized to push this agenda forward. And I think there is a lot to talk and exchange more in the coming months. And I'm grateful for Bridging the Gap to have taken this initiative for this conference, and really looking forward to meet you again tomorrow to continue the debate and conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Well, my thank you goes to you and to IDA and ADF, UNICEF, ILO, and everybody else who have contributed so much and so intensely to the organization of this conference. I think it's really time to conclude this workshop. I want to thank each and one of you for attending, participating, also those who were here before and have disconnected in the meantime. See you tomorrow. It will be another very interesting day to discuss about inclusive social protection in Africa. This is not a full stop. This is the beginning of a new sentence, of a new paragraph of the history of inclusion in social protection system in Africa. I'm sure of that. Thank you very much. Stay safe, everyone, and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
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 Obrigado. Tchau, tchau. Até amanhã.